Hello and welcome. This is the movie discussion pocket dimension, where time does not exist and the only thing that matters is film. I'm Cole, and that's Jay, and we are back following our big 100th episode extravaganza, finally. I was thinking about this, it only occurred to me just a little shortly before we started doing this show today, is that we're following up our Apocalypse trilogy show with a movie called Apocalypto, even though it is pretty different. But yeah, so tune in next week for Resident Evil Apocalypse, and then X-Men Apocalypse, and then Apocalypse Now, and this, what is it, the Scout's Guide to Surviving the Zombie Apocalypse. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of movies we could do that have Apocalypse in the title. Anyway, well, it has like that title. It is pretty different. We were trying to steer in a different direction. Apocalypto, this was when Jay had recommended, because it's a movie that I did not watch back in the day. I think it's 2006. Mm-hmm. And I was just saying before we went on air that I remember seeing some teasers for it, just some really short things for it in theaters a couple times that year. Like, it was like this big event. It was a big deal that it was, of course, a Mel Gibson film. Because rightly or wrongly, Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ was, this big phenomenon, right? So it's like, what's he going to do next? And Apocalypto was a very different sort of thing. And I don't know. I mean, one of the reasons I think we decided to do it is because there's just not too many films out there that cover this sort of subject matter, cover this part of the world or this era or anything. This is about the Mayan Civilization, one of the Mesoamerican civilizations from, Mexico, Central America, and South America, including that group, like the Olmecs, the Aztecs, the Incas, probably some others that I can't think of. But yeah, the Mayans, who are now considered lost. There are still people living today that have Mayan ancestry, mm-hmm. but there's no such thing as like any sort of like pure Mayan left. Anybody that has Mayan ancestry in the Mao is mixed with various other races. I was interested in looking at the cast of this movie, in that it's kind of weird to see like this really authentic movie, and then when you see the credits roll, like all the actors have European style names.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they all do.
I thought they were mostly Mexican. You mean like Spanish names?
Yeah, like Spanish.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Yeah, certainly there. Most of them were Mexicans, and again, some of them probably had some Maya. I mean, just so they could speak the language, right? Because one of the things that makes the movies authentic is they are speaking at least a version of the Mayan dialect. Now, is it exactly the same as it was 500 years ago? Probably not, but still, pretty close. And that's one thing I like about how the movie starts, is like the movie, it's kind of like Star Wars in that it just jumps right into it. There's no opening credits. There's no directed by Mel Gibson. There's no starring this. And I think that's a good way to approach a movie like this. It just gets you right into it. Plus, there's no big name to advertise beyond Gibson's anyway. So what would really be the point in having a bunch of names? So I think this helps draw you into the world and story right away, is that there's no distracting title stuff on the screen.
It's really bizarre that it was, as successful as it was, considering the subject matter. I'm guessing it's just the, Mel Gibson's name attached was able, not that it's not a great movie, it's just that it's such an odd concept.
Yeah. But
it works so well. I mean, I love it. It's like completely different than anything else, and that's why I like it so much. And it's kind of like what you were telling me, you took like a deep dive on like Mayan research. I kind of did the same thing.
Yeah, I can't watch a movie like this without having to, look into at least some of the surface stuff. I mean, and it is interesting. And one of the things about the movie, of course, is like until you see it all the way through, there's not really any way to really date it. You have to see to the end to really come up with an approximation.
So that's
the Wikipedia article says it's approximately 1502.
Yeah.
And I mean, you don't necessarily have to take that as word of God, because there's nothing that actually states it. And as far as like first contact with Europeans go, that was, I think, the year, but that was pretty brief and fleeting contact. 1511 was actually the year that there was sort of like a more major thing. And one of the reasons I like to put it at 1511 is not only does it coincide with that, but also I looked up solar eclipses, and there was a total solar eclipse on April 27th, 1511. So I like to think it was then.
I think 1511 is the first time they made landfall. I don't think Columbus actually got onto the land.
Yeah, the very first contact, it was Columbus. It was Christopher Columbus's fourth voyage, and he sent his brother, and it was his brother and some men that had made contact with the first Mayans. But it was just it was off the coast of Honduras. and it was just some small. They like took over like it was like a small, like rowboat or something that the Mayans were going down the river on. Then they basically like took it over.
Sounds about right. But I love
and took a guy hostage.
The guy, yeah. Well, that was in 1511, right?
No, this is the very first thing.
Oh, okay.
1511, the shit really did hit the fan, though. I'm sure you read about it. It's one of the most, because one of the things that came out about this movie is, of course, there's a bit of criticism saying about how like bloodthirsty the Miss makes the Mayans look. Which again, I would say, well, this is just one movie. It's not necessarily saying for the entire people. Plus, it's not like there isn't some stuff to back this up. And yeah, I'm sure Jay looked into some of that 1511 stuff too, and it's one of the most ghastly accounts you'll ever hear about Europeans coming into contact with native North or South Americans. And then you've got guys that get shipwrecked, and most of them die, and then the guys that survive in the lifeboat are taken prisoner by this Mayan group, and several of them are sacrificed right off the bat and then eaten at a feast, while others are sold into slavery. A few others escaped and managed to get into the custody of another tribe of Mayans. And those ones were a little nicer, took them as slaves. And one of the guys, I had his name on here.
It's like Aguilar or something like that.
But yeah, one of the guys, he wound up actually making what is it? He wound up rising up through the ranks a little. Oh, his name was Gonzalo Guerrero.
Oh, yeah.
What is it? Yeah, I'll read the whole thing here just because it's actually interesting.
Yeah. He actually kind of assimilates, right?
Yeah, he does. He becomes like one of the war chieftains, and even like marries a woman and has kids, which might be the first instance of a European like interbreeding with Mayans. But anyway, so it's a pretty grisly sail. So 1511, the Spanish caravel Santa Maria de la Barca set sail along the Central American coast under the command of Pedro de Valdivia. The ship was sailing to Santo Domingo from Darien to inform the colonial authorities there of ongoing conflict between conquistadors Diego de Cuesta and Vasco Núñez de Balboa in Darien. The ship foundered upon a reef known as Las Libros, the Vipers, or alternatively, somewhere off Jamaica. There were just 20 survivors from the wreck, including the captain. And then there was this guy, Geronimo de Aguilar and Gonzalo Guerrero. They set themselves adrift in one of the ship's boats with bad oars and no sail. After 13 days, during which half the survivors died, they made landfall upon the coast of the Yucatan, which is where this movie takes place. They were seized by Halak Unek, a Maya lord. Captain Vivaldo was sacrificed with 4 of his companions, and their flesh was served at a feast. Aguilar and Guerrero were held prisoner and fattened for killing, together with 5 or 6 of their shipmates. Aguilar and Guerrero, this is all Wikipedia, of course, managed to escape their captors and fled to a neighboring lord who was an enemy of Halak Ulik. He took them prisoner and kept them as slaves. After a time, Gonzalo Guerrero was passed as a slave to the Lord Nakshan Khan of Chichumal. Guerrero became completely Mayanized and served his new lord with such loyalty that he was married to one of Nakshan Khan's daughters, Zahil Ha, by whom he had 3 children. By 1514, Guerrero achieved the rank of Nakam, which is a character we'll see in this movie. Well, not the character, I mean a rank. A war leader who served against Nakshan Khan's enemies. So, yeah, that has to stick in your mind.
I just think it's hilarious when they washed up there, they like immediately sacrificed a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of the controversy was saying that the Mayans didn't actually do a lot of human sacrifice, but I think that kind of disputes that fact right there, doesn't it?
Well, I think again it has to do with the timing, because from what I can tell, like doing a longer view of Mayan civilization, it's that in the early days they didn't do much, and it was towards the end that they started to do more, and it had more to do with the fact that they were being influenced by the Aztecs, who of course did tons of it.
Right.
Because if this is taking place at the beginning of the 16th century, by now they've had some cross-pollination with the Aztecs. Plus, it's worth noting that the sacrifices that take place in this movie are within the circumstances that they talk about. They talk about sacrifices happening. We've got a place that is experiencing a blight and a whole bunch of disease. So that is actually the type of time. So yeah, it's not like it was an everyday thing. The sacrifice was. This was sort of like desperation.
So it was. I mean, this is like the end of the Mayans anyway. Even if the Spanish didn't show up and start slaughtering them.
Right. That's the other thing that you should take away from this era is that the Mayan had its own trajectory, and this was towards the decline. They were already well in decline. Their major cities had all been abandoned. If you read about like the height of their situation, this is several hundred years removed from that. Mm-hmm. So it's true. Even if the Spanish hadn't come, and started doing what they were doing, the Mayans were already on their way out. Of course, I mean, Spanish accelerated this. And I'm sure that it's not, I'm not saying they would have just died out, but they wouldn't probably have died out, but they were, much lessened compared to other Mesoamerican tribes in the area at that time.
When I was a kid and, they taught us about like Cortez and stuff, they never brought up that these people were such warlike and sacrificed humans all the time and stuff. It was just that Cortez came in there and killed them all. That's basically the story that we were told.
Yeah.
I was never, that they kind of started it by sacrificing a bunch of the Spanish, I mean.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I hate to be one of those both sides people, but it is kind of sort of a case of that. And I mean, I realize the Spanish probably were never going to be peaceful anyway.
Sure.
Because when you talk about like Europeans coming to the New World and raping it and doing all this stuff, like at the very top is the Spanish. I mean, of course, the English and the French and stuff did stuff, but what the stuff that happened in North America is like almost not. I'm not saying almost nothing, but is much less than what happened in Mexico and South America. Like, holy shit! Like, the Aztecs are gone. The Spanish wiped them from the earth, and you can understand why, because not the Aztecs, sorry, the
Mayans.
Or no, yeah, I do mean the Aztecs, don't I? I'm getting all confused now. Yeah, the Aztecs are gone now because they were so violent. But I mean, and the whole thing about the Mayans, yeah, about their own decline, that came from within. They were their second period, because this takes place at I had written down some of their periods here.
It's
the terminal. There's like the terminal classic era, etc. Anyway, this takes place during an era when they were already in decline, and one of the main reasons they were in decline was because for hundreds of years they were in almost a constant state of warfare with each other. These weren't Mayans fighting other things; these were Mayans against other Mayans, because that's what happened. You had these city-states rising and falling, and they would have trade and they would have war, and that's one of the reasons why the Mayans had declined, was because they were actually wiping themselves out. But yeah, Cortez obviously was quite bloodthirsty, but it's not like the Aztecs didn't have enough bloodlust on their own side too.
It's almost like the way that I kind of had it pictured in my mind was there's these natives like standing holding like a bunch of corn with a smile on their face, and he comes in and just starts chopping their heads off. That's Cortez.
Well, the thing about Cortez is he'd already like left such a trail of bodies in his wake before he ever actually made contact with like the main part of the Aztec Empire. Because one of the things that's like you could either say was smart on his part or was evil on his part was like the fact that he took advantage of the fact that so many of these, whether it was Mayans or Aztecs, were fighting amongst themselves, that he would recruit a whole bunch of them. Say, oh, you hate those guys? I'm going to take them out. You join me. But of course, he used them basically as cannon fodder. He didn't give them good weapons. He didn't give them armor or anything like that. He just said, you go in front. So whenever you're talking about some of these huge battles between the Spanish forces and various Aztecs and stuff like that, there were also various Mesoamericans on the Spanish side, and they were more or less being used as cannon fodder throughout this. But yeah, the whole that's actually, I'd love to see a movie about that, about how Cortez's whole campaign, because I didn't have time to read it this time, but I've read it before. It's a long, bloody thing full of all sorts of weird stuff and a lot. And I think the other thing is like maybe it's because of the the white European view is we're not giving enough credit to these Mesoamericans for how political they were, because they had their own political structures in place and they had their own reasons for wanting to topple this government or whatever you want to call it, topple this royal family, topple this establishment, and put up their own. There was a lot of that going on, which obviously the Spaniards took advantage of. They said, oh, this isn't like some peaceful people that's all, rallied to defend themselves against us. They're all splintered and fighting each other anyway. We can definitely take advantage of that. And they did. So I'd like to see a movie that does that. This movie, of course, doesn't touch on the European stuff at all. It just ends with like that sort of moment to let you know what's sort of about to happen, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely puts a stamp on it so when it is.
Yeah, so I like imagining it's 15. I like to imagine it's that date. That's around that date, April 27th, 1511, since it lines up so well with the total solar eclipse, which plays a role in the movie. I
know we're jumping around here, but from what I was reading, they were saying that they use those solar eclipses basically to control the people, like because they were so smart. They were so much smarter than everyone else. As far as astrology and stuff goes.
Right, that's the one thing you hear a lot about the Mayans is that they were very advanced when it came to astronomy. They were good at they made star charts and figured out some of the rotation of the planet, all sorts of really advanced stuff that people didn't know about.
The layman, it's kind of like how they controlled their people by they knew it was coming, so they set all this sacrifices up and stuff. It's kind of interesting.
And of course, the Mayan calendar is part of that too, and that's the other sort of thing you hear about the Mayan calendar and how it famously predicted the end of the world in the year 2012.
I saw the other day. It's kind of funny that they read it wrong. That it was actually, I think it was Father's Day was the actual end. This Father's Day of this year was the end of the world.
Yeah, there's so many stupid conspiracies and myths and stuff tied into that. You can't make sense of it all because it's 99% bullshit. But
I get a lot of the characters mixed up, and they have kind of crazy names, so it's kind of hard.
So our main character is Jaguar Paw. That's who the main guy is. He's Jaguar Paw. Actually, for the first 15 minutes of the movie, I didn't think he was the main character. I thought the guy that they were pranking was going to be the main character because the focus seemed to be on him.
Cocoa Leaf?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was pretty funny. They pranked him a couple times there in the beginning.
Yeah, they get him to eat the tapir's balls. And then when he's telling the other guy that he's, had this problem, he can't get his wife pregnant, the guy tells him about the special leaf or something to rub on his junk before sex, and that'll help.
Here's some ghost peppers to put on your balls before you do the deed.
And that becomes quite the public humiliation, he and his wife. In front of everybody.
Well, she's washing her mouth out, which makes you think she was giving him a blowjob, right?
Yeah, I assume, yeah. That's their warm-up, I guess. Makes sense.
Makes sense.
But the first 15 minutes is just to give us an idea, I guess, of what life is like in their village and sort of the camaraderie they share. But yeah, up until a certain point during the battle when they get attacked, I thought he was the main character, and then just the focus switches to Jaguar Paw.
His dad was Sky something.
Flint Sky.
Yeah, Flint Sky.
Yeah.
And then his name changed to Almost.
Yeah, the bad guy came from that. But it's interesting. The movie came out 2006. The year before that, one of my favorite movies, Batman Begins, came out. And I'm not saying there's any correlation, but it was interesting that just when what was it, Middle Eye or something like that. Anyway, the really sadistic guy, when he overhears him call him father, so he decides, I'm going to kill his father right in front of him. Right before he does that, the last thing Flint's guy says to his son is, "Don't be afraid," which is the last thing in Batman Begins. Thomas Wayne says to Bruce after he gets shot. He says, "Don't be afraid," and then he dies. And it's very similar in a way.
There's a few references in this movie. There's a part where I was actually
I know what you're going to say.
And I see it in the trivia here, so it answers my question. Oh. I'm walking here. Hey, I'm walking
here. I am walking here. That's pretty funny.
I was is that a Midnight Cowboy reference?
It has to be the Mayan version of it, yeah. So the audience, there's a part well into the movie after they've been captured and the war party is bringing them towards the city place where the sacrifice is going to happen, and they're on the outskirts, and suddenly there's this group that's cutting down this huge tree, and the tree smashes down right in front of them, and the war party leader guy goes, "I am walking here," and they're like, "Oops."
I was wondering if that was what they were going for.
I mean, how could it not be? It's pretty funny. Yeah, I thought so.
It's nice to know that reference. Real quick. I know you haven't seen Marathon Man, right?
Still haven't, no. But I know that's
in Gremlins 2, when the googly-eyed gremlin is doing, he's playing he's a dentist.
Sort of. That movie is so blurry for me. I forget so much.
Well, he says, "Is it safe?" And I never caught that reference, but it's from Marathon Man.
Huh. So, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Gremlins 2 does a lot of references.
That's a good movie, man. I love that.
It's a really underrated sequel. I need to see it again because I forget a lot of it.
I think it's how you do a sequel to that movie.
I still think we could do a Gremlins 3, not a reboot or a prequel, just a Gremlins 3 set, in the same universe.
Why not, man? We've got hell, you could probably do puppets for cheaper than CGI.
Yeah.
right? I mean,
yeah. Gremlins is one of those movies that I always knew about, but then I just sort of, for a big part of my life, forgot kind of about. But it's become like a movie that I traditionally watch around Christmas again, which I've started doing the last few years after many years of not, remembering it fondly, but not actually watching it. But yeah, I always like Gremlins.
I've watched it a few times in the past during Christmas, and it's so dark, It's just like, man, it's a depressing Christmas movie.
I know, especially considering it brings up the fact, which is actually a myth, where they talk about, where she says, like, did you know, like, suicides spike around the holidays, which is actually not true.
Is it not? Okay.
Yeah, it's a myth. And the other thing is the whole movie stops dead when she tells that story about, like, her dad dying or whatever, pretending to be Santa Claus.
In the chimney, yeah.
It's so not needed. Like, how is this still in the movie? Like, I'm not saying it ruins it, but it just stops the movie dead. You totally forget the Gremlins were ever in the movie. She's talking about this really weird, dark Christmas story about her dad getting stuck in the chimney pretending to be Santa Claus. I'm like, Jesus.
I like it.
Is that Phoebe Cates?
Yeah. I like it. It definitely says this is not a children's movie,
I suppose.
I mean, if, you got to break it down to.
Sure. But yeah, so the main thing that you would talk about for this movie, of course, the main takeaway is like, well, is it historically accurate? I would say pretty much.
They tried really hard, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, if you want to quibble about some of that stuff, I think it's all defensible. Because even if there's, like, for one thing, like, this is kind of similar to what I was saying about that show about, like, the Nazi hunters and that thing about all the, they got criticized because they had this thing about the Nazis playing a game of human chess with some of the prisoners at the camp, and the Holocaust Museum was upset about that. And they said something. I read something that it's kind of a similar idea where they were saying, like, there's not really any evidence to back up that whole thing. Where in this movie, like, after they decide they don't need to sacrifice any more of the prisoners, they just decide to get rid of them by, like, playing, like, target practice with them. I think that's defensible because, yeah, okay, so there's no historical record of it, but it's believable. And even if it never actually happened, it's not a huge leap. It's not like, whoa, like, this is crazy. That would never happen. Like, we know some of these bad guys are pretty sadistic.
I mean,
so I don't think that's a huge leap. Even if it never actually happened once in real life, it's not like it's like this fantastic lie. I think it's fine. I think if it's the story, I think it's fine.
The only real complaints that people had with the realism was that certain things may not have existed at the same time. It's all stuff the Mayans did, but it may have been 200 years before or whatever. Like they may not have been doing human sacrifice at the time, or may not have been had the pyramids made yet, or whatever.
Actually, at this point, they definitely had the pyramids made, and the whole point was like, this is the end of. This is supposed to be around their decline. At the height, which was only a few hundred years ago, that's when they had the pyramids in the major cities. At this point, the major cities had been abandoned. And what I like about the movie is we're seeing, like, this is like obviously some group of people that have come onto an abandoned city and taken it over. But it's not like the splendor that the city originally had. This is like a place that was already dead, and now you've got these people that are having their own problems, again, the stuff about the crops and the disease. And now they're sort of like living, it's almost like they're in a ghost city.
Mm-hmm.
So the pyramids, several of those pyramids and places had already been around for a few hundred years and mostly have been abandoned. Of course, it's too bad that the movie doesn't show Chichen Itza, which is because I was going to say, in my travels, in my world, I haven't been to a lot of places, but I've been to the Yucatan Peninsula, and I've been to Chichen Itza, and actually, that holds the record for the hottest day I've ever experienced in my life. You can probably beat it living where you live, but it was 44 degrees Celsius that day, which is way over 100. And I was wearing like a black T-shirt, which didn't help matters. But Chichen Itza is a great place. It's like, obviously, it's a big tourist place. I was there 20 years ago. It was year 2000. And it's this big, huge, just open field. So there's just no shade or anything from the heat. So terrible. And then down at the end, you've got the very large pyramid, which I'm sure, even if you don't recognize the name, I'm sure most people, if they saw a picture of Chichen Itza, they recognize it because it pops up a lot. Anyway, very tall step pyramid. In fact, and nowadays, I don't know how long it's been, but you're not allowed to go up on it. But when I was there, you were. So I did climb it, and I went up on top of it. And it's crazy because, like, it is so steep climbing it, and the stairs are tall. They're not like normal steps. They're like really Like some of these steps, you really have to lift your leg up. And one of the worst parts about knowing it is like, I don't know if they monitored how many people go up at one time, but quite a few people did. Because as you're going up and you see people behind you, you realize if you fall, you're taking a bunch of people with you.
Mm.
So, I mean, no wonder people aren't allowed on it now, because it just seems like a horrible accident waiting to happen. And once you're on top, there's no railings or anything either. And I saw like little kids running around. Like I was 16, and I was still super stressed out by like these kids like not being properly restrained. But anyway, so at least I can say that I got to do something like people can't even do anymore.
What was the name of the place you went?
It's called Chichen Itza. It starts with a CH.
I was just trying to see. I've been to a few places in Mexico. I was close to the Yucatan Peninsula when I went to Cozumel. But, you know, it's all tourist bullshit. That's one thing I would really like to do before I die is go visit some of these pyramids. Like Machu Picchu and
oh yeah, Machu Picchu looks awesome. Plus, it's just so high up.
I was looking at a list of these things, and it's really crazy. There's a lot of different types of natives that built these things. Of course, the Mayans and the Aztecs, but the
oh shit. Okay, ignore that one. That's wrong.
Zilhua.
Yeah, I don't know.
Assuming that's how you pronounce that.
Yeah, I'm pretty bad with some of these pronunciations.
Classic Veracruz, the Olmec, of course, the Mayans, Aztecs. Shoot, I can't pronounce that word. Toltec.
Oh yeah, Toltecs. I heard about the Toltecs. The Olmecs were another one that the Maya around the time of this movie, the Maya were starting to mix a bit with the Olmecs and take some of their traditions and some of their stuff too. So. Because that's the other thing about these Mesoamerican societies is there's cross-pollination between them. They influence each other. So they had some things that were very different from each other, and they had lots of things that they shared. Probably the most fascinating thing to me about like any of those societies was, you know, when you talk about like the height of some of them, like particularly like the Aztecs. Well, this is what I'd love to see a movie of is I can't pronounce it, but the city that used to be where present day Mexico City is there now, and it's a city. It was the biggest city in the Aztec Empire. It was called so it's long. Anyway, you can find it. And it spent at least a certain point of time as possibly, because there's not really a way to verify, but I remember looking this up before, is you can find out like you can find a list of cities going back to the ancient times like that were the biggest in the world population wise at a certain time. And there was a certain period when that city was supposedly, maybe you can't 100% prove it, was the biggest city in the world. It had like well over 100,000 people in it. And that's a city that Cortez himself eventually helped fucking destroy. But I would love to see a movie that recreates it and shows it, because there's really almost nothing of it left. And I don't know if it's the same one, but the Aztecs also had a couple ones, or at least one that were out on a lake, because they made artificial like islands on the lake. The whole city's like over the lake, and they literally had battles with the Spanish, where the Spanish had to like, you know, come out over the water. And yeah, it's all really fascinating stuff. But anyway, what I was trying to say is, so a lot of these civilizations were known for being very advanced, a lot more so than probably Europeans gave them credit for at the time. In a lot of ways, we talked about the Mayans, of course, with the sophisticated calendar and their advances in astronomy. But one thing that none of these societies developed was the wheel. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
For hundreds of years, like they had plenty of advancements. They made all sorts of inventions and stuff, but they did not. None of them came up with a wheel. And they didn't even have like carts. You know.
When was the wheel invented? Do you know a date on that?
I don't know, but I mean, it can go back so far that at least there was definitely wheels being used in like BCE, right? So the ancient world we're talking about, right? And yet you had these people well into like the 1500s or whatever, and they never had wheels. Didn't see wheels until they saw the Europeans using them.
The Egyptians had wheels. I know the Europeans had wheels.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm sure Chinese and places did too.
Sure.
What's weird is this is a society, or well, actually not just one society, but I mean, yeah, basically we'll say the Mesoamerican societies, they did not develop wheels, which seems crazy. Especially when you like look at like the famous Mayan calendar, and there's that Mexican sunstone. They're like shaped like wheels, and yet they didn't like have carts with wheels or anything like that.
That is interesting.
And you won't see a wheel in this movie, which is historically accurate.
And, I don't know, man. How do you feel about the pyramids? You think there's any ties to like, I don't know, aliens or something?
No, I think that's just people that don't do their homework. Humans have always been responsible for amazing stuff.
But you've got people in two parts of the world that have no communication with each other, both doing the same thing. And it's like unexplained on how they were able to get all these, giant pieces of rock in places.
Oh, you mean how like you've got like pyramids in Egypt, but then you've got pyramids like thousands of miles away on another continent. Well, they're still different. I don't know. I mean, I think it just has something to do with something like human nature. Because think about not just inventions, but think about myths. Pretty much every society has like its own creation myth, but they also all have flood myths. Like people talk about like, in the Bible, the Christian Bible, there's Noah and the flood. But if you look into other religions and other societies, pretty much all of them have a flood myth at some point.
Yeah.
And they're all like spread out and far away from each other and could not, and this is well before, they were mixing. They were, this is back when distances were huge and they weren't going on ships. So some of that stuff, again, I don't think that's because of aliens. I think it has something to do with human nature. It's just something that we're tied to. Like wanting to build towers or pyramids to reach the sky just seems like something that is just human nature to me.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is weird. Like, and the other thing is like sometimes you'll see that meme where people say something like, it's just another form of like white European racism that people think like, oh, these peoples couldn't do it, so must be aliens. But that's not true either because there's stuff like Stonehenge that people can't understand, and that's white. Like that, the Celts. And you look at those stones, and you're like, how the hell did they do that? And it's suggested like those stones had to come from a place like 250 miles away or something. Crazy. Yeah. And those are really old stones. That's like way before they had any good technology. So that goes all over. So no, I don't think it's just some racist fantasy. But I do think it's fantasy. I don't think I don't think it's aliens. No.
And then you've got those Easter Island statues or Easter Island heads.
Well, that's the thing, right? For so long, people thought they were just heads, and then they found out that there's buried bodies under them. And yeah, but that's a cool mystery because like we literally don't know who did it. Like there's nobody there anymore. So yeah, I love stuff like that. I always look into things like that. It's really interesting. But yeah, so that's one of the, like I said, this movie only covers a small part of Mesoamerica stuff, but anything that does, it's not like there's a lot of movies that do it. And certainly this is like the only movie I can think of like it's within the sphere of Hollywood that covers it. Though on TCM several times over the years, and I always miss it, I have to look it up. There's a movie that has Robert De Niro in it. And this isn't exactly related, but it's like he was playing like a Portuguese guy. It had something to do with missionaries and slave traders in Brazil in like the 17th century or something. And I can't remember what it's called, but I'm pretty sure Robert De Niro's in it. And I've always wanted to see it, and I've never been able to make room for it. I'm going to look it up so I know what the hell I'm talking about. It's from the 80s, I believe. Let me see if I can. The Mission. So there's this 1986 movie called The Mission. And let's see what it is. It's in the 1750s. And yeah, there's a Jesuit priest. And it takes place in Argentina and Paraguay, where they're building a mission. But there's also some stuff about like the slave trade going on there. Anyway, so it's not exactly entirely related, but it's it's in that ballpark. It's South America a few hundred years ago. Anyway, I've always wanted to see it, and I never managed to actually catch it because there was a couple times I wanted to record it, and I didn't have room for it.
Jeremy Irons is in there, so
yeah, Aidan Quinn too. People forget about Aidan Quinn. Aidan Quinn was a pretty big deal for a while. Like, I don't know. I guess he never really broke through as a big star entirely, but I don't know. He was in some big movies. He must be retired because he's like hasn't been in a movie in 100 years, and he's only like 60.
I think he's done a lot of TV stuff.
Yeah. It's the last thing I saw him in. We got to go back really far. I guess he's in Jonah Hex. That's funny. Terrible movie.
Oh God, is that the that dumb girl?
Megan Fox.
Yeah, is she in that?
I think so.
Ugh, that movie was terrible.
Oh, I know. Super short too. At least I didn't see it in the theater. I remember talking to Orc a few years ago, and he said he saw that in theater with his friends, and they couldn't believe that it was over. It says a runtime of like barely like 80 minutes, and they're like, "What? It's over?"
Yeah. Well, at least I didn't see that one in the theater.
Yeah.
Josh
Liam Neeson's in it too.
Josh Brolin, John Malkovich. Come on, man, that's a pretty good cast.
Yeah. And by Liam Neeson, I mean he's in The Mission.
The other one, yeah. I figured.
But anyway, it's a movie I've always wanted to see that, again, is not too close to this movie, really, but at least would be, sort of close. I mean, I get it. This movie's, it's almost 200 years after that, and it's in a further south and stuff. But I just mean, there's just not a lot of stuff that deals with that kind of setting. So, yeah. So that's kind of the point I was making. Anyway, I'd like to see it. It actually won the Palme d'Or for Best Cinematography, which is cool. The cinematography in this movie, of course, is really great, but this is one of those movies where you'd have to be kind of incompetent not to get good cinematography out of it, because you have such, you've got such nice setting, and you've got some cool stuff too. I mean, they built a set to make the Maya city, and they did a pretty good job with that. And again, if it doesn't really match up with pictures you've seen, again, they can only be artist renderings, because obviously there's no photograph of those. Keep in mind, this is not supposed to jibe with what those cities would have looked like at their height. This is supposed to be this is one of the cities that would have been abandoned, and now probably what we're seeing is people that have settled onto it after the fact, decades later. That's why everything looks so washed out and everything. Because if it had been a couple hundred years beforehand, the city would have probably been more vibrant, and there probably would have been more trees and other stuff. But so yeah, what they're trying to convey here is the city has already sort of died, and these people are sort of, like I said, they're living in the bones of it type thing.
So I guess plot wise, they get captured basically.
Right, so we've got a fairly small tribe of Mayans, living out in the forest, leading fairly inconsequential, happy lives, doing their hunting and that sort of thing. Very close community, pranking each other, raising their children, etc. And they show some of, what that sort of life would be like at nighttime. They all get together and they listen to the elder, and the elder tells them stories, which I'm sure is probably what they did. And then, they get attacked by a war party from a city, and a lot of them are killed, and a lot of them are captured and brought back. So, one of the criticisms they were talking about the sacrifices in the movie, it is true that usually, even when the Mayans did do sacrifices, they probably wouldn't just sacrifice a bunch of random people they found in the forest. The point of sacrifices is it sort of has to be somebody. So, usually people that were sacrificed were members of the royal family or something from another tribe. You had to be of some status. To just be random people living in the forest getting sacrificed, maybe that isn't too realistic. But again, you can't say it couldn't have happened. And as I said, I think the movie covers its tracks very well, because again, they're showing us that this is kind of times of desperation, right?
Right.
They're in decline. There's this disease. The crops are dying. So yeah, they might think, okay, we'll just sacrifice whoever we can find. Again, even if it's not true, it's at least believable. It's it's not a huge leap. So I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree.
And I guess there is a little precursor to that, because before they go back, of course, after they catch the tapir, the hunting party gets come upon by this other group that are wandering. They say, we just want to pass through, and they look all freaked out, and they just say, our lands have been ravaged. I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe you could have had some follow-up questions to that. Maybe you should have said, what ravaged your lands? What's going on? Maybe you should have been a little more inquisitive than, oh, okay, your land's been ravaged. Come on through. And now we'll think nothing of it. Maybe you should have thought that maybe that means you're in trouble too. But anyway.
Yeah, he had that dream with that guy, with the leader of the other tribe.
Yeah.
That basically was saying run or something.
Yeah, a bad omen or whatever.
Right before they came and attacked their village.
Yeah. a lot of stuff about fear, of course, because that's the thing. They talk about how like they've been consumed by fear, and that's what his father's telling you. Like, I didn't raise you to live in fear. You have to overcome it. And as we said, that's the last thing he says to his son, even after he sees him get killed right in front of him. It's like, don't be afraid. And that's really what he has to do towards the end of the movie. Is like he has to like take control of his fear so he can get out of the situation of being hunted down. And of course, the Mayans, the other thing I guess they're kind of known for, like I said, it's the 2012 thing, is of having their own, not just creation myth, but their own destruction myth. So they put a little bit of that into the movie, in that when they pass into the city, they get accosted by the afflicted little girl that like makes her weird predictions. And I guess she's just sort of predicting how not just the movie will end, but also how like the Mayans will come to end too because of contact with Europeans. The other thing that's worth pointing out, too, is the same thing happened in North America, is that, yes, for all the horrible things the Europeans did, and they did many, and they killed a lot of them were killed also just inadvertently by disease. Like, the Mayans, by the time you got to the 1540s, 90% of their population was wiped out. That wasn't all murder by Spaniards. That was also a combination of things, and a big part of it was foreign disease, because just like in North America, what happened is you had Europeans inadvertently bringing these diseases that had never been in the New World before, and you had people that had absolutely no immunity to them, whatever, and dying very quickly to it, and it's spreading very fast. And when that happened all over the Western Hemisphere, basically, during this point with European contact. And that's not something the Europeans did on purpose. It's just something that was a consequence. So I don't know. I assume they're probably not implying that the sickness that's killing the people in this city is brought by the Europeans, because I think they're trying to imply they haven't had major contact with them yet. So I guess it's supposed to be something else. But I guess they're trying to say, it's like, you think this is bad? It's going to get a whole lot worse. But then she does say some stuff that I guess lines up with the movie, because she talks about like the guy that brings the jaguar or something. And well, one, his name is Jaguar's Paw. Two, he literally does lead a couple of them into an actual jaguar. Yeah. She also says something about him being reborn in the mud or something, which is what happens. He falls into like quicksand or whatever, and then he comes out. So there's a few things there that line up with what actually happens in the movie. But it's like, yeah, we can't talk about the Mayans without having some sort of like prophecy of doom, because that's another thing, like in general pop culture, they're known for, is like having a prophecy of doom. Although again, they're hardly the only society with a creation or not a destruction myth. It's just that they famously seem to have an actual date for it. I mean, if you're a certain age, everybody can remember that there was at least a very small percentage of the population that thought the year 2000 was going to do something. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, like the year 2000, the Antichrist is coming, or whatever they thought. And of course, nothing happened. But a lot of people tied up a lot of meaning to that number, despite it not really coming up in writings. They just thought, well, it's significant. It's 2000. It's like, I don't know, was 1000 significant? Really? So
yeah.
And you also have to keep in mind that it was what is it, the Jacobean calendar, or I can't remember what it's called. Well, the whole point is, just like we talk about the Mayan calendar, until you get to like a couple hundred years ago, people in different parts of the world were working on all different calendars. Just because we said it was 1751, that's not what the Chinese thought. That's not what the Mayans thought, that kind of thing. So,
right.
That's another thing that I think gets overlooked by people that don't think too much about history or look into it, is like, we just assume like, oh yeah, we've always had this calendar in place and everybody's agreed by it. But no. So that's the other thing too. It's like, I can't remember if this lines up or not. It's like, was the Mayans' idea of 2012 actually what correlates with our 2012? Like, I don't know. I haven't looked into that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sure they've done their best to solve that riddle.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's like you said, there are no Mayans left. So how do you interpret a calendar, with people that just assimilated with other people? And
right. Anybody nowadays that's an expert on Mayan culture is only an expert insofar as you can be an expert on like dinosaurs.
Yeah.
You weren't there. You didn't see it or experience it. You're just an expert in that you've gone through as much of the evidence and studies as you can. But it's not like a first-hand account thing.
And speaking of experts on Mayan culture, they did have one that they consulted quite a bit for this film, at an attempt to be as historically accurate as possible.
Yeah, I see that.
Which is really cool, to know that. And I don't know, it's so amazing to me to think that these people existed as little as 400 or 500 years ago. There were still people like that on Earth. I don't know. When you look at the old world, at how old it is,
It's interesting. The movie could have been about Aztecs, and they chose not to do it because it says here the screenwriter, Mel Gibson. They were also interested in portraying, this is again just a Wikipedia article, portraying and exploring ancient culture as existed before the arrival of the Europeans. Considering both the Aztecs and the Maya, they eventually chose the Maya for their high sophistication and their eventual decline. Here's Safina's quote. He says, "The Mayas were far more interesting to us. You can choose a civilization that's bloodthirsty. You can show that the Maya civilization that was so sophisticated with immense knowledge of medicine, science, archaeology, and engineering, but also be able to illuminate the brutal undercurrent and ritual savagery that they practice. It was a far more interesting world to explore why and what happened to them." I guess so, but it's not like the movie fully explores that. It touches on it a little bit. It is more what it does. Like I said, if you're curious, like Jay and I, you're going to look into some of the context here. But if you're just watching the movie, it's hard to really know what to make of it. Are you really supposed to understand that this is their decline, or that they were in decline before they even had contact with the Europeans? Are you supposed to understand that they've had some cross-pollination with people like the Aztecs, and that's where they got some of their more bloodthirsty rituals? If you're just taking just the movie, it's there's a lot that you're not really going to know or understand.
Yeah, I mean, the decline part, from what I recognize, was just the fact that the Spaniards had arrived.
Right.
I didn't realize that the Mayans were already on their way down.
Yeah.
So I did some research on it.
Exactly. And I think that's how it is for most people. You would just think, oh, okay, yeah, the Europeans came, start fucking everything up. But as we said, the Mayans, they were in constant state of warfare with each other for centuries, and that is actually sort of the catch-22 that is sort of comes with humanity, right? It seems like the more sophisticated a society is, the more geared it is towards that, because it was their sophistication that led to it in the first place. Let's go back. Let's do this the big way. So we'll go back to prehistoric times when people all over the world are just, the most primitive as it can be. They're cave dwelling and they don't have societies, and they're hunter-gatherers. And that's 40,000 years ago up to a certain point. Sometime between 40,000 years ago and 20,000 years ago, you have people started in Africa, and then they spread out to Europe and Asia. So around the 20,000 year mark, give or take, of course, you find there's actually they can't get to the New World because of oceans, but there's a land bridge now between Russia and North America, where the Bering Strait is now, right? So then you've got peoples coming into North America through the top and making their way down. The Mayans would have, been people that over several thousand years or centuries trickled down south and further south. And they had a period, it wasn't until about 6,000 years ago, so 6,000 BCE, we'll do BCE before Common Era, that agriculture really becomes an actual thing. So now instead of hunter-gatherer societies, we actually have a real society based around agriculture. Then they had their pre-classic era, which was 1500 BCE to about 250 CE. And this is where they make all sorts of advancements, one being pottery. So now what you have is these people spread out through the Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and a few other neighboring places. And they're starting to trade with each other, which is great. But you know what that also leads to? It leads to competition. And next thing you know, you've got warfare. So as they actually got more, sophisticated, and they got more, they got more technologically advanced, it's actually just led to more fighting, because that's kind of the story of mankind, no matter what part of the world you're in. So,
that's human nature, is what that is.
Their golden age was said to be about from 150 CE to maybe sometime after the 10th century.
When they were maybe more united as a people, and they were able to focus on their intellectual stuff instead of warring.
Right. And it was during this time that they made some of their major cities, and a few of them, there was a city in Guatemala, I didn't write down its name, but it had a population of about 100,000. But then what happened is you have several major cities, and instead of working together, they become competition for each other. So then you've got, that's the other thing that rises with, this is how the structure of society changes, because now you actually have a class system, and now you've got ruling class and royal families, and then you've got all that below, which leads to all sorts of, again, conflict and hardships. Slavery wasn't something that was brought over. It's something that they engaged in themselves. Now, again, there's not a lot of evidence to suggest how extensively the Mayans specifically use slavery, but they did use it to a certain extent. As far as we can tell, there isn't evidence suggesting that like it was a big, huge, thriving thing for them. But it was also there's also at least some historical record that yes, sometimes when there was warring parties fighting each other, they would take captives and use them as slaves, if not sacrifices. Like that is true. But as far as some of the sophistication goes, it seems the slave business was not that sophisticated. It was more of sort of an afterthought, I guess. I guess that's the thing. Slavery always existed. It just sort of took Europeans to really make it a business. I guess is one way of putting it.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I guess did the slaves like tend the corn crops and stuff? Like you think?
Yeah, I suppose. Maybe doing daily household things for some of the upper class people. You know, household servants.
It wasn't like franchised out until the Americans.
Well, like I said, I mean, it's another thing that would be an interesting thing to do a movie or two on is, one of the worst things that humanity has ever produced, which is the Atlantic slave trade, which is one of the most monstrous things people have ever done to each other. It'd be interesting to do a movie or two that touches on that, because that was a thing that was going for about 400 or 500 years.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, franchising. It really took Europeans to like start moving around, because you had various societies that would fight each other and maybe enslave their enemies. But then when you had the Europeans and saying, "Hey, we can capture people from this place and take them somewhere else as slaves, and hell, we can sell them to you." We can, as you said, make
it was a formula. They had a whole formula down to where you take these people, they're displaced, they know nothing about the New World,
right?
And that's why they couldn't use Native Americans as slaves, because they knew the land too well and they kept escaping. So it was a whole process. Yeah. Unfortunate process. But
unfortunate. Yeah. So I mean, you've got anybody of any sort of African descent that has ancestors that have lived in North or South America. At some point going back, probably. If you go back far enough, there's going to be, because somebody was transported because of the slave trade.
Was it all slave trade? Because you've got Trinidad and Jamaica, and they've all got African ancestry.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, all those islands, they had plantations too, right?
Same stuff, huh?
Yeah. And I mean, of course, it's an unfortunate thing that happened, but the good thing that comes out of it, of course, is how it's led to cultural mixing, of course, which is something that actually happened to the Mayans themselves. As we said, the Mayans died out, but they never truly 100% died out, because some of their cultures got adapted by surviving peoples. It even mixed in with Christianity pretty well. There's people to this day living in places like Mexico that have traditions and heritage that links back to a mixture of the Christianity brought by the Spanish and some of the traditions from Mayan culture. So that's kind of interesting.
You can also say that's where stuff like the Day of the Dead stuff comes from, and they're Catholics, but they practice all these other unique
and that comes from various Mesoamerican cultures. And as we said, just like the slave thing, like on Caribbean islands, they have this heavy Afrocentric stuff that obviously came from Africa, like stuff like voodoo in Haiti, from Africa, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's interesting just seeing how, when you think you'd have cultures that are so different from each other, you think they'd be so at odds, and then you find out all these ways that they can actually mix and combine. It's very interesting. Which again, I think is something that people had sort of a misconception about. I think a lot of people think, it's no surprise that there have been so many wars and there's so much hate in the world. Like there's so much differences between us, so we're always clashing. But if you look at it a little closer, yeah, that's true. You can't say it hasn't happened, but you'd be surprised by how much times people have interwoven and intertwined and mixed things together peacefully in a harmonized way. I mean, that's just the sort of thing certain people don't want to know about. It's the type of thing you could shock quite a few racists about. Again, like trace back your own roots and find out just how mixed they are, because people did come together and they did share traditions and they did.
Yeah, what would you call that? That's like the study of like culture, right? Like, I mean, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
you can trace that stuff back.
Yeah, let's see. The consultant was Richard D. Hansen, a specialist in the Maya and assistant professor of archaeology at Idaho State University.
Can't imagine there's many of those in the world.
Yeah. Other scholars of Mesoamerican history criticized the film. What they said were numerous inaccuracies. A number of scholars have also risen to defend the film, citing ignorance of political practice as the primary motivator for the criticisms. Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, I saw the criticisms, and they're really kind of nitpicky things. Man.
As I said, I think they're all defensible. I think they're all pretty defensible things. Because even if there's certain things where you're pointing out, like, well, there's no historical evidence of this or that happening, it's at least within the sphere where it seems reasonable.
Exactly.
And as I said, like, if you take the context of the movie properly, it's not just saying, oh, the Mayans were, like, famously bloodthirsty and always sacrificing. They're showing that this was sort of like an extreme situation. It was during the decline, and you had these people that had occupied one of the dead cities, and they were going through their own hardships and stuff. So it was more out of desperation. And again, it's not really in the movie, but if you look it up, you would see that by now they would have had some influence from other cultures, including the Aztecs, who were much more into the whole sacrifice thing. So the movie, I mean, that's the other thing, I guess, is the problem. Whenever you make a movie that's sort of like, could be simply because there aren't other movies that really cover it, right? So they make it seem like it has to be the be-all, end-all, when it's not. It's one story about, one group. And yet everybody thinks, well, this is the only popular movie out there about Mayans, so it kind of has to be the final word on Mayans, which isn't really very fair.
Which I think that's why I find this movie so interesting, because it's something that I don't know a lot about. And, it's I was reading that, Mel Gibson decided to make it in, traditional Mayan language, to the best of their ability.
Yeah.
And because it takes everyone out, because it's a language that no one speaks, so, it's not like if you speak Spanish or English or whatever, you can follow along. Like, you're completely immersed in the world.
Right. Actually, Gibson has a quote here that says pretty much exactly that. I think hearing a different language allows the audience to completely suspend their own reality and get drawn into the world of the film. More importantly, this puts the emphasis on the cinematic visuals, which are the kind of universal language of the heart, which, I think is true. And I think it really works out that the movie doesn't open with any sort of opening credits. You're just pulled into this world and this story. And it's quite captivating. Like, it's not a complicated story. It's not a deep story, but it's engrossing.
It is, yeah, very much so. It really made me want to take a deep dive on doing research on this stuff, and I just keep reading more and more, and it's just such an interesting world that I've never really done a lot of research on before.
Yeah,
these people, Mayans.
So the main pyramid was not based on Chichen Itza. It was based on one called Tikal, which is another ruined city. Let's see here. Tikal.
Was that
which is actually in northern Guatemala.
Okay.
But the big pyramid and stuff that we see in the movie is based on Tikal, which is a pretty high one. Might even be higher than Chichen Itza. I'm not sure. It's similar looking, but it is a bit different.
I believe Chichen Itza was 85 meters.
Okay, this must say.
If I remember right. I had the whole list pulled up a minute ago.
Okay. It's another UNESCO World Heritage Site, just like Chichen Itza is. I forgot. During my visit to Chichen Itza, there was some stuff about sacrifices too, but it was sort of the more bland kind of sacrifice that I guess isn't as spicy for movies and stuff. But it was like, because it's true, what they showed in the movie was like killing them on the pyramid and then dropping their head down the steps. I don't know if Mayans did that. Aztecs definitely did that. They also pulled out the heart. I don't know if Mayans did that. And there's the other thing. Is it that easy to cut out a heart? It cannot be. I mean, you got rib cage in there.
I'm good at it.
All I can think is, well, they don't show the cut. So maybe he's cutting open the stomach and reaching his hand up, right?
That's kind of what I thought, yeah.
I guess that's the practical way of doing it if I had to think about cutting up people's heart. But anyway.
Even still, you wouldn't think you could do it that quickly, but yeah. Right.
But anyway, so they talked about the sacrifices that they did sometimes do at Chichen Itza, and they didn't do them at the pyramid. So as I remember Chichen Itza, you have this big, huge open field, massive open field, sun beating down, and then you've got the big pyramid. To the sides, there's some smaller. There might have been some smaller pyramids that are pretty much gone now. There's just like some humps of rock here and there, but also way on the other side, like if you're facing Chichen Itza, way up on this side, there's like this path that's this long dirt road that again is in no way protected by trees or anything like that. And it's not that long. It takes maybe 10 minutes to walk down it if you're just walking at a normal pace. But at the end of it is like a big, huge like sinkhole, much bigger than the one in the movie, like really big. And apparently they used to throw people in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember, but they had a name for the road too, because like the same thing you were feeling is what most people would feel. Because most of the time you'd be walking down this road, you know, and the sun would just be beating down on you. It's like a track to hell, because you know once you get to the end of the road, they're going to toss you in the hole. But that's the main way they sacrificed people in Chichen Itza, was they threw them into this hole.
That's not climactic enough.
Yeah, it's not, but.
Chichen
Itza also was a place where they played that weird like sport that's, I can't remember what it is, but you know, sort of like a combination of like lacrosse or something with a ball. But you might have heard of like
highlight or something.
I don't know, but whenever you hear about like those civilizations that have a sport about throwing a ball, like Chichen Itza had like courts where they played that. I remember they talked about that too, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I just recently went and my daughter had a field trip to Natchez, and that was a tribe there. It was the Natchez, and they talked a lot about playing that sport. It's like a net with a ball in it.
Yeah, it was really by the 1520s that the Spanish started to conquer the Yucatan Peninsula. Although they'd of course had some, in about a decade before that, they'd had some. Dealings with them. It was 1526 when it started in earnest, and by like the mid 1530s, they already pretty much conquered it.
By the way, Chichen Itza was 55 meters tall, and the largest is 450.
That's insane.
That's Cholula, Mexico.
Yeah.
That's the largest pyramid and the largest man-made monument anywhere in the New World.
That's awesome. So I saw a picture of that. Yeah.
There must be some pyramids larger in Egypt.
Probably. Chichen Itza is certainly big when you're up on it. I mean, it's high.
I can only imagine on the steps.
Going up those steps is so nerve-wracking. And again, now you can't do it. And I can understand why. So I feel lucky that I got to do that.
Someone probably died. Had to put a stop to it.
I wouldn't be surprised. Let's see if I can find out. Subscription. Tourism. Itza, World Heritage Site, the second most visited of Mexico's archaeological sites. The archaeological site draws many visitors, blah, 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 blah. From the popular tourist resort of Cancun, which is true because that's where I wound up after. Because I think I said I went on a 9-day trip. The first 5 days was historical stuff. The last 4 days was just fucking around in Cancun. But yeah, that's all on the Yucatan Peninsula, the city of Mérida. 2007 was named one of the new 7 wonders of the world. Okay, that's interesting. Blah, 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 blah. Ensuing publicity reignited debate over the ownership of the site. 2010. Okay, I don't care. Has closed a number of monuments to public access. While visitors can walk around them, they can no longer climb them or go inside them. Climbing access to El Castillo. I'm not sure which one that was. It was closed after a San Diego, California woman fell to her death in 2006.
Yep, there it is.
Yeah. So I was there in 2000, and you were still allowed to climb it. And everybody got up and down okay. Even though I was a 16-year-old, I was still a bit unnerved by some of the kids running around once we got up top. I know I went to another one. I can't remember what one. These were ones you weren't allowed to climb, but you could go up on a part, and it was cool. And what they did was they had like a sound and light show where everybody would sit in like these chairs, and you would see the pyramids in front of you, and they would project like colored lights onto them, and they would like tell a story. I don't remember which place that was though.
They'd get a DJ and get some glow sticks.
Maybe.
But by the way, that Chiluan pyramid is almost 3 times taller than the tallest Egyptian pyramid.
Oh yeah, I was going to say the Egyptian pyramids weren't that tall, were they? I mean, I know they were big, but
I've had anything to compare them to. I didn't really know how tall they were.
Because Egyptian pyramids aren't for climbing, right? There's no way of climbing up them. So, like, I'm sure height mattered to a certain extent, but it wasn't like you could go up on them. You went into pyramids, not on top of them in Egypt.
Because of aliens.
Because of aliens. Or perhaps it was Apocalypse, speaking of Apocalypse. If you know your X-Men history, you know that Apocalypse had a lot to do with that because that's actually where he was born. He was born in ancient Egypt, and he was it wasn't aliens, it was time travelers. It was again, if you're a big fan of the Avengers, you might know the character Kang the Conqueror, a famous time traveling villain. At one point in history, Kang went back to see Apocalypse because he knew that Apocalypse would rule around the year 3000 or whatever. I don't know. But anyway, that's where he got some of the technology and stuff. That's from Kang. So there's time travel possibilities, not just alien possibilities. There's also time travel possibilities. There's an asteroid named after Chichen Itza. Okay, yeah, I must have been here. The Grand Ball Court at El Castillo. I must have been there because I remember them talking about like playing the game. El Castillo must be close to Chichen Itza. It must be part of the same site. I'm not sure. It was a long day, a lot of walking, and again, it was the hottest day I ever in my own life experienced. I never had a hotter day.
I think El Castillo is the name of the actual pyramid, and it's in Chichen Itza.
Oh, okay. Thank you for clarifying that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So can you imagine the one you were on was 55? If you were on one that was 450, that's insane.
That is crazy. I mean, can you imagine him like climbing that back in the day?
Imagine chopping a head off and rolling it down that thing.
That would take like 2 minutes. Get to the bottom.
Which, I mean, that's probably the most memorable part of the movie is that entire scene.
Yeah. And I guess that's the part that gets the most criticism, but I don't know if that's entirely fair.
It's, at the end of the day, you got to tell a entertaining story.
Yeah. So basically, it says that by 1697, that was the end of entirely the Mayans, pretty much, as a people, anyway, like an organized people. So they hung around, but the Aztecs, I think, were wiped out before that.
The Aztecs,
they were a lot more aggressive, so you can understand why the Spanish wanted to get them out of there.
Yeah, I mean the Aztecs were literally wiped out. I think the Mayans kind of just they interbred and basically just turned into what is now native Mexico.
But that was after 90% of their population died because of contact with the Spanish. Right, 90% of their but again, it wasn't all being wiped out like deliberately. A lot of it was disease too.
You can imagine a large percentage of that was probably disease. Like smallpox, I guess, would be a big one. Probably mumps and polio, or I don't know what all was around then. I know smallpox.
Yeah, I'd like to see a movie about the Spanish conquest of the Aztecs. I think that would be really interesting.
Matthew McConaughey could play Cortez.
Why not? There's nothing he can't do. Yeah, I'm trying to find the city that was on the lake. Because, yeah, they had an entire big city that was out on the lake, which is really cool.
Was there a pyramid there?
Not on the water, no. But there might have been one nearby because they definitely made them. There's got to be some movie about the Aztecs.
I can't really think of any.
Okay, by the way, yeah, their main city was, which is what is now modern-day Mexico City, was Tenochtitlan. And at one point, I think it might have been the biggest city in the world, population-wise, with well over 100,000 people. Yeah, that was the one that was on the lake. It was built on an island, what was then Lake Texcoco in the valley. But, like, I know parts of it went out, like, over the water. Like, they had to, it wasn't just all built on an island. They had to, like, build things to hold, artificial stuff, like Venice or something almost.
Oh, okay.
See, the cities basically existed between 1325 and around 1521. 1521 is when Cortez completely destroyed it, which I think is terrible. Even if the Aztecs were bloodthirsty enemies, no sense in wiping out one of the greatest cities ever.
You said that was where modern-day Mexico City is? Which is still one of the most populated cities in the world.
Yes, it is. So I guess not much has changed on that.
Less pollution, possibly.
Possibly. But yeah, see, there's some really great pictures of it. Here's a picture of the conquest of Tenochtitlan. And it shows like this long bridge that they had to make to go out to the island. Oh yeah, it also shows the horses. That was another big advantage the Spanish had over the Mesoamericans that they conquered, was besides having guns and armor, they had horses. And from all accounts I found out, all the Mesoamerican people, whether it was Aztecs or Incas or Mayans, were fucking terrified of horses because they'd never seen anything like them, right? Horses didn't exist in the New World. All the horses that live here now were transported from the Old World centuries ago.
I can imagine that would be a pretty terrifying sight, a man on a horse.
Exactly. Imagine a conquistador in like shiny armor with a big sword coming down on you on this massive, powerful animal. So that was a huge psychological advantage they had too, was the horses.
So they didn't have any iron or anything either, right? So
right.
All they had, their knives were made out of that volcanic rock, obsidian or whatever.
They had obsidian and jade and stuff, which the Spanish saw as valuable, but it wasn't great for weapons compared to what the Spanish had. The Spanish had cannons, for God's sakes, although dragging them inland wasn't easy.
Man, imagine how terrifying a cannon would be.
And of course, another thing people, of course, remember about Cortez is he was so dedicated that he burned his ships to tell everybody that he was doing this for real. Because Cortez was very much a self-starter. When you hear about a lot of these various European explorers and such that colonized here and there in the New World and around this time, a lot of them were on like official government missions. Cortez wasn't. Cortez was like living in Cuba and I don't know, doing some sort of being governor or something there in Cuba, and he was really bored and he wanted to go be that was his idea. He wanted to be they were his own ships. They weren't like the governments. They weren't the Spanish royalties. They were his. He got it in his head he wanted to. Cuba was boring and he wanted to go conquer and find new places. So I guess he was proactive. But yeah, it was a big self-starter. And as much as he had it seems one-sided. There were a few times where it was really touch and go, where he might have gotten himself killed. There were a few times where he was actually quite cut off from his resources and only had a few men with him and got out of some very dangerous situations. So it's not like it was just always he was completely, protected at all times by a bunch of soldiers with guns. There were several times where he was very vulnerable and very lucky. So yeah, I'd really like to see a movie that talks about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all really fascinating stuff. So yeah, there are still some ruins of Tenochtitlan, of its main temple complexes still around, but so little of it remains. They did find the Aztec calendar stone there.
They had aqueducts and things. So.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Well, yeah, it's one of those cities I'm most fascinated with because it doesn't exist in any way anymore, and the only pictures of it are just artist renderings.
Most of the population like to bathe twice a day. God, wish our population would bathe twice a day.
I know. What the hell, man? We're going backwards. Most of our population now believes if you wear Axe body spray, you can go 2 days without bathing.
That is a bath, yeah. Go for a swim every couple of days and spray on some Axe. You're good to go.
Yeah. Not that it's directly related, but now I want to find that list again of most populated cities. Because I know now, in the 21st century, it's Tokyo. For almost the entire 20th century, it was New York City. For pretty much the entire 19th century and part of the 18th, it was London. And then before that, it gets a lot murkier because then it really jumps around. Okay, here's one. From Jericho to Tokyo. I just want to see if I can find it on the list here.
Yeah, and then Delhi is number 2 now. Shanghai, Sao Paulo, then Mexico City, Cairo, Mumbai, Beijing, then Osaka, then finally New York City.
Yeah. What's crazy is, so I was right. Tokyo for pretty much the 21st century. From 1925 on, it was New York. From 1850 to 1925, it was London. But you know what it was throughout the 1700s? A city in Thailand called Ayutthaya. That was in the 1700s, the biggest city in the world was in Thailand. Like, would anybody thought that?
Wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah. This list doesn't include the Mexico City on it, so I must have seen it on a different one. So maybe it wasn't or maybe it just was one of the biggest, but not the biggest. It was easily the biggest in the New World, but it was, I don't know. Yeah. The oldest city on this they have is Jericho, going back to 7000 BCE. So as you might expect, what's also interesting is in like the first few thousand years when we're still in BCE, they've got different places in Ukraine on here 3 times. From 3800 to 3700 BC, Dobrodavadi, Ukraine, then a place in Iraq, then another place in Ukraine, then another place in Ukraine. Then it gets what you'd expect. It's like Iraq, Egypt, Pakistan, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, then China, Egypt, China, Iraq, India. This is all still BC. This is how far back they're going.
Wow, I don't know Iraq was big back then.
Yeah, this is all still the ancient world, right? So now we're finally catching up to history I'm familiar with. You've got around 100 BC, the city of Alexandria in Egypt, and then that about 100 years later, that gets surpassed by Rome. So for the next about 300 years, Rome is the biggest city in the world with the population, and might be the first city with over 1 million people. It's got like over 100 million people or something. I don't know.
In 1520 to 1521, an outbreak of smallpox swept through the population of Tenochtitlan, and that's pretty much what made the city fall.
Yeah.
To the Spanish.
Yeah, and big combination of factors. Anyway, getting back to this movie, so yeah, I mean, the setup's pretty simple for people that don't know. Again, we have this forest tribe of Mayans living fairly happily. Then they encounter this other tribe that's making their way through the area, saying their lands have been ravaged. That very night, they're ambushed and attacked by a tribe from a city that I guess they know nothing about. The city kills a lot of them, takes a lot of captives. I mean, it's pretty heartbreaking and hard to watch. Not only does our main character have his father murdered right in front of him, there's also a part where then they're all tied together on the same thing, where Coco Leaf watches his wife get dragged away, presumably to be like gang raped. He's
I'm
screaming,
sure,
like cowards at them and stuff. So that's pretty awful. And they have a pretty long march to the city, and at one point they almost go over a cliff.
some great acting there in that initial scene when they storm the village too.
Yeah, and this is something like, since I just don't know enough about the area or the people, right? Like, how many of these people were professional actors?
Not many.
I was gonna say, like, not too many of them could have been, right?
I think the main
for
guy,
the sake of authenticity. Because I mean, just how lucky would you be to have that many professional actors that can speak that language? Not a lot of people can speak this language. So to find like actual professional actors that can, so yeah, I would assume there has to be a lot of like non-professional actors thrown into the mix, and they do very well.
Yeah, great casting on this as well. Rudy Youngblood, I think, is Jaguar Paw.
Yeah.
He's probably one of the only guys that had done other stuff at the time. Yeah, he was in. Oh wait, no.
Did you see the name? Did you see the name of the little girl that gives like the weird warning? She has like 5 names. It's really long. I just remember that from the credits when I watched it again today.
She's basically unknown as well. It's like the only thing she's ever done, because you go down the list and everyone's picture is from this movie. So
yeah, that's what you figure. That's what you expect.
Village Girl? No. What was her name? I mean, what was she in the
Well, I don't know what she'd be. She'd be like the girl with the warning, or you'd think I'd remember, considering I just saw, like I said, I remember seeing her name in the credits and I knew it was her. So what did I recognize her as? I'll know the name when I see it. Just hold on. There's like 5 names. Oh, see, they only have part of it here. At the end, they have her as Maria Izadra Hall, as sick Oracle Girl. But in the actual credits, when you watch the movie, it's longer than that. There's at least 2 more.
Okay, I see it here.
Yeah, it's second last on the cast list on Wikipedia, but on the actual credits of the movie, it's a longer name than that.
Flint Sky is played by a guy named Morris Bird Yellowhead.
Yeah.
One word. That's pretty awesome last name.
Yeah. And I mean, there's names like that all throughout North America, too, with various indigenous peoples. I remember there was a guy that played hockey. His name was Zach Whitecloud, which I thought was an awesome name.
When do you think that got translated into English? Like for an English surname?
Quite a while ago, I guess. Anyway, I'm one of the people, like a lot of people, who hated The Passion of the Christ and thought it was, just self-indulgent garbage. But this movie seems to accomplish everything that, like, Passion of the Christ set out to do in a much better way, in that it, like, tells an authentic story, with, as many cast members as they can to make it seem authentic, and with the language and all that. And I realize that it's different because Passion of the Christ is based on, like, a story that's well known throughout the world, and this is just a made up story, so it's hard comparing them from that. All I know is that this was actually interesting and entertaining, whereas like Passion of the Christ just felt like I was like being punished. It felt like homework watching that movie, man.
I've never seen it. I've just heard stories.
I cannot recommend it. You'll just be bored. You'll either just be bored and or upset.
Wasn't he going for authentic on that one as well, though?
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, for both of them, the big deal, like, because he had people speaking Aramaic, I think.
Right. Now, how do you do that? That's a dead language, right? I mean,
it might be a dead language, but at least it's one that's studied a lot. There's at least people that, there's books and stuff in it that still exist that people study.
I mean, I understand Latin. Nobody speaks Latin as a first language, but the Aramaic is like, it's only in like scrolls and stuff, right? Like,
as far as I know, but in the academic world, at least it's one of the better known dead languages. I guess if you're gonna talk about dead languages, right? Like, at least Aramaic is like one of the better known ones, because there are quite a few existing texts that are written.
That's read right to left, also, right?
I can't remember, probably.
Like Hebrew.
I guess the other thing about Passion of the Christ that I don't even remember from watching it, but I know like a lot of people thought it came across as anti-Semitic, and maybe it did. I don't know, but I mean, obviously, knowing what we know about Mel Gibson now, it's not much of a stretch. But
I mean, whatever. Yeah.
But anyway, what's good about this movie is like it's entirely different.
We can. We can kind of date this movie because this is before he had his tirade on the Jewish people.
Well, this is, like we said, it was just a huge deal that he was once again directing this movie, right? That's really what got people to see it. Was that it was the new film from Mel Gibson, who was really proving himself as this really not just a good actor, but a really good director. So this is like one of the last things that really worked out well for him before things started to go downhill.
Yeah.
Self-inflicted, of course. It's not like I feel sorry for him or anything.
Yeah, just unfortunate. Maybe don't do that. But,
I mean, it's unfortunate, particularly for people that like enjoyed him as an actor. Like, he was never my favorite actor, but I liked seeing him in movies, and he came across as an ordinary, decent guy in a lot of interviews and stuff. And I don't know.
I'll give the guy a pass, man, because he was probably blackout drunk, and come on.
I don't know.
Sometimes you have bad days, Maybe just don't do it publicly.
I don't know. I think it's a little more complicated than that, but at the same time, I don't care enough because he hasn't, as far as I know, he hasn't done anything specifically to hurt anyone. He's just sort of revealed himself as kind of a shitty person with shitty opinions.
There's been a lot of people lately of all races that have came out against the Jews, and no one seems to be taking shots at them. So, people
they should. I think. I mean, geez, the Jews have had enough. I mean, when's enough and enough? If you're Jewish, if you're still hearing this sort of nonsense in 2020,
and lots of nonsense going on lately.
I think also a lot of those people that are like racist against Jews literally don't even know how few Jews there are in the world, because they come up with these conspiracies that like even logistically couldn't make sense. It's like, how would such a small population control so much that you think they control, right? You know, the people with their theories about Jewish, you know, controlling like most of the world's wealth and like the media and stuff. It's like that's not even feasible from just a logistics standpoint. Unless they know how to brainwash people or replace them with like robots or something.
Yeah, I think
I probably just put new stuff out in the ether now. It's like Jews are using robots.
Probably more true at one point in history than it is now.
Yeah, maybe when there were literally more Jews.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's enough designated Jewish talk because of Mel Gibson. But anyway, from strictly as a filmmaker, Mel Gibson's a pretty good filmmaker, sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, if he hadn't done what he hadn't done, he probably would have continued to be involved in good films. Because also in the last decade or whatever, you know, when you only have so many people that will work with you, his output is pretty bad. He's got like a new movie coming out that's like set in Puerto Rico that I'm sure is going to be crap. Do you see that? I like
most of what he's done in the past decade.
I haven't.
Get the Gringo was okay. Bloodfather was okay. Nothing great, you know.
Like,
but
I saw Edge of Darkness. It was pretty crappy.
I mean, you know.
I saw The Beaver. It was pretty crappy.
I haven't seen The Beaver. I'm not watching that grab. But it was the Hacksaw Ridge. That was decent.
It was decent. And that was sort of like his sort of almost sort of comeback movie, right? It's like, okay, enough time has passed. We forgive him now. He's doing Hacksaw Ridge.
I made a public apology, or did I?
Another one of those really fake, crappy apologies that so many celebrities are great at giving.
Yeah.
Probably the best one lately was, I don't even remember his name. What's that guy? It's not Farrell or Pharrell. It's another one of those guys. Shit. It's another one of those guys. He was like a hip hop guy, and I was like a producer. He might be on The Voice or something. Because Nick Cannon, yeah. Because he recently said something against Jews, and he just gave like the worst attempt at an apology I've ever seen in my life, possibly. It's like basically a non-apology.
Well, I've heard a lot of people come out and, you know, endorsing like Louis Farrakhan and stuff, and, you know, widely known for being anti-Semitic. So
don't know that guy.
Yeah,
I'm better off. But yeah, I just recently read about the Nick Cannon stuff, and like he comes across as such a jerk.
I haven't even really read about that. I know what happened, but I'm not really familiar.
Well, I read the apology before I read what he actually said, and that's like obviously what he said was bad. But I just mean, like, don't even do an apology if that's what you're going to call an apology, because it's like the biggest non-apology I've ever seen in my life. Possibly.
Wasn't he on like a radio show being interviewed or something when he said it?
It was some sort of podcast thing.
I mean, Mel Gibson was drunk, pulled over by the cops, right? I mean,
yeah, no, this was not only was it just like that he was saying this, but he was with another guy that had already made like a bunch of anti-Semitic comments, and that guy started first, and he was going on something, and Nick Cannon first said something, "You're speaking truth," and then he built on it, right? So yeah, there's no walking back from this. This is on a show and completely of his own idea. He wasn't drunk, pulled over by the cops or anything.
But I just think, you know, if he's drunk, pulled over by the cops, pissed off at life, whatever, obviously having a tough time, you know, in his life at that time, I can give him a little bit of a pass for that. You know, when you're on a show, you know, talking about it, it's completely different.
I think it's completely different, but I still agree with a lot of people that say the same thing they were saying like about like Roseanne or whatever. It's like painkillers or or being drunk or whatever. These aren't things that make you racist. You know, you can be a jerk, but I mean, if you were always racist, you're going to say racist things regardless.
Was she anti-Semitic as well? Or
no, she had said something that people thought was like against black people.
Said someone looked like a monkey or something, or gorilla.
Yeah, and I mean that's a tough one because I understand where it comes from, but it really might not have been her intent at all, right? So that's a difficult one to extrapolate because it might not even have occurred to her that it could be interpreted that way. Because sometimes people don't always consider all the racist angles because they're not racist. Again, I have no reason to defend Roseanne. Don't give a shit about her or her career. I'm just saying it seems like that's a comment that could possibly be misunderstood.
Exactly, and I mean she's a comedian, so maybe didn't think before she posted that or whatever. But
yeah, I mean that's what she lost the show about, I guess.
Yeah,
I guess. Anyway, I didn't mean to go on to a thing there because I don't care about her one way or another. It doesn't matter to me. She was never anybody I was ever remotely entertained by at any point in my life. Never watched her show, and I don't know if she even did anything besides that show. Was she in movies? I don't know. If she was, not anything I saw.
She was in one of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
She was in a movie with God damn it, I can't think of the name, but it doesn't matter.
But anyway, she's somebody that's had no impact on my life. I never watched a second of her show.
Oh, I watched a lot of the show, not the comeback, but the original. I watched.
Yeah, no. I mean, I know that was one of the bigger shows in the 90s, but again, I just didn't really watch too many sitcoms or shows like that. I mean, I watched things here and there, on and off.
Speaking about that show, it's got one of the weirdest endings. I don't know if you remember. Well, you didn't watch it.
There was a thing about stuff being a dream, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the last season was really crazy. Like she wins the lottery, all this crazy shit happens, and then she's like, it turns out to be a dream at the end. But
why do you think they did that? Do you think they had to walk it back and be like, well, we have to justify how crazy it was?
I don't know.
Did they think like people weren't thought, okay, this season's gone off the rails. This has gotten really stupid. And it's like, wait, if we say it's all a dream, then it's justifiable. Or do you just think it came out of nowhere saying it was a dream?
It probably has a lot to do with John Goodman wanting to leave the show.
Right. And John Goodman's had an impact on my life. I've seen him in plenty of things besides that, right?
But he wanted to get out. I think he and Roseanne didn't get along very well. Understandably, I don't think anyone got along well with her.
Yeah.
But, he wanted out, so they wrote him out. Basically, the season before the last, he had an affair with a woman that had taken care of him after he had a heart attack. I think
his character, right?
Yeah, his character.
Okay, his character.
And then in the show, at the very end, you find out that that didn't happen, but he actually died of that heart attack.
Jeez, that's a lot to drop on you for a little sitcom.
Yeah, like a St. Elmo's Fire ending.
That's weird. I mean, I get it. Like, as somebody that didn't pay that much attention to a lot of sitcoms, now that they, in the last 2 years, they write a lot of lists about them and stuff online. I've dug into them. A lot of them are a lot weirder than I ever understood.
But the last season, it's worth it just because it's so fucked up. Because there's one episode where they hook up, her and her sister hook up with the girls from Absolutely Fabulous, or the ladies from Absolutely Fabulous. So, they kind of get drunk with them, and hooligans, shenanigans.
Yeah.
I can't remember. It's been a few years ago, but I was just really interested by how weird it was. The character of the daughter, Becky, who had been played by someone else for 6 seasons before the original Becky came back and played her character again. It was the girl from Scrubs. I don't know if you ever watched Scrubs, but the blonde.
No, I know what it is. Some goofy hospital comedy.
That was who played the other Becky, not the original.
Another one of those shows, when you find out how many seasons it had, it's shocking. That had 12 seasons or something? That had a lot of seasons.
Maybe 8. Oh, Scrubs had a ton, yeah.
Yeah.
Roseanne may have had 8.
No, Roseanne, I have no idea. I couldn't even tell you when it aired. I guess early 90s to sometime.
Pretty early 90s, because she blew up on Johnny Carson, I think. And then that's when she got her show, and it became widely popular. Quick.
Yeah, technically, this movie was released after Gibson's 2006 DUI incident, which garnered Gibson much negative publicity and magnified concerns some had over alleged anti-Semitism in his previous film, Passion of the Christ. Blah, blah, blah. Say what you will about him or his problem with booze and Jews, he is a serious filmmaker. That's a New York Times guy.
I mean, how do you say that the Jews did kill Jesus, right? I mean, isn't that kind of like a fact? I mean, as the story goes?
Well, I mean, it's the Romans executed him, but the idea was sort of like that the Jewish crowd egged them on. Because there is a part in the Bible where it talks about how the Roman guy in charge of that district, Pilate, was there, and he said to the crowd, he said, "What's the point of even executing this guy?" He's like, well, "What's his crime anyway?" And like the crowd just were like, "Get rid of him, crucify him," and stuff. And supposedly, like the crowd was mainly made up of Jews or something. It's something like that. But I mean, it was technically the Romans that killed him and the Romans that arrested him in the first place. They arrested him because they didn't like that he had. Again, if you're taking this as a historical, and I like I said, I don't necessarily believe in a lot of the spiritual side of the Bible and a lot of stuff, but there's enough historical evidence to me to satisfy me that Jesus of Nazareth was a real person that existed, mainly because we can thank the Romans for it, because the Romans were the ones that kept records. And that basically, at that time, the local government was concerned about him having followers and such, and that was why. So, yeah, I mean, people make that claim that Jews killed Jesus, but it's not exactly true. It's partially true.
By the way, Roseanne had 10 seasons, went from 88 to 2008. Well,
okay, so before the 90s. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
No, that's counting the new one.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, that's what's.
I knew it had to be late 80s, early 90s to be the beginning. Anyway.
Okay, yeah, so basically 88 through 96.
But I guess it's hard for me to remember now. But I guess in the movie they really like play up the whole jeering, like the idea that there's this crowd of Jews and they're like jeering at him and like, "Boo, you're terrible," when he's up on the cross and stuff. Which, again, historically is probably true, but that's what they did to everybody that was up on crosses. That was sort of the point. That's why they crucified people. That's why they didn't just take them behind a shed and like cut their heads off. They crucified people to make a big fucking public spectacle of it, right? The same thing as they did in all sorts of societies when they publicly executed. You know, you've seen stuff they'll hang people and people come and throw tomatoes at them and stuff. Like that's something that has historically happened in many civilizations throughout history, is that when there's a big public execution, you usually have a crowd that's really riled up. And of course, again, if you read the Bible, you know, there were people in the crowd that were very upset and wanted Jesus to get out of there and wanted him to save himself, because that was the whole thing, right? Like, if you are Jesus and you're Christ, you have the power to save yourself. And according to the Bible side of it, the whole point is him saying, well, the whole point is I can't. But I don't want to get into the weird spiritual side of it. But yeah, so it's hard for me to remember because I only saw the movie once a million years ago, or in 2004. I actually saw it while it was in theaters. I saw a bootleg version of it that somebody got a hold of.
Oh, really?
I got a bootleg DVD of not great quality, but it wasn't like filmed in the theater with a shaky cam and people standing up. It was just like a bad DVD rip or something, right? But that's how we saw it. And I guess in that scene, maybe he does some things to make the people in the crowd seem extra evil. Maybe he like zooms up on their faces, and I don't know, something like that. But that's where like some of that comes from, is what I mean, I'm not going to re-examine the movie. I don't give a shit.
Yarmulkes and Star of David on their neck and everything.
Possibly, I don't know. It's hard to remember.
I was reminded of Borat, the running of the Jew.
Yeah, that's right.
So funny.
Like, the only other thing I really remember from that movie is there's like a scene where like I can't remember if it actually happens or if it happens in his head, where he has an encounter with Satan, and Satan is trying to like tell him to just like abandon the people or something, which I can't even remember is in the Bible or not. It's hard to remember. It's been so long since I read that stuff. But yeah, that's in the movie. He has like an encounter with Satan, where Satan is sort of like, save yourself, get out of here, screw these people. And Jesus is like, I can't do that. I'm Jesus. Whatever. And Satan, of course, is just played by some person. I don't know who it is. Gabriel Byrne, probably.
Norm Macdonald.
And Jesus is played by Jim Caviezel, which is a weird choice, but I don't know. At least in this movie, like, I guess Mel Gibson realized that it probably wasn't a great idea to cast a bunch of Caucasian actors. This time he went authentic, because he didn't do so much in that. He's like, So they're Caucasian. They're speaking Aramaic. What more do you want? Okay, fine. I don't care. It's true. Jeffrey Hunter played Jesus in the 50s.
Were they all Caucasian in the film?
Probably not. I'm sure they had a mix of other people. Again, I haven't seen it in so long.
He would have been Middle Eastern, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
If, you know.
Yeah, he would have been Middle Eastern. I mean, he was from Jerusalem. And he was descended from David. So, yeah.
Mm.
So I don't know where the theory that he was black comes from either, because that doesn't really make sense. Anyway, I'm not trying to upset people. I really don't care what race Jesus was. And I guess I upset more people by saying, I believe he was a real person, but I don't believe he was literally the Son of God. Oh, well. Anyway, that movie was shitty, but I think Apocalypto was quite good. But again, talking about, like, you know, Gibson's problems at the time. One of the Boston Globe guy says here, Gibson may be a lunatic, but he's our lunatic. Well, I wouldn't wish him behind the wheel of a car after happy hour or at banal birth function anytime. Okay, some Jewish thing. Behind a camera is another matter. So, yeah, some people were basically saying he's anti-Semitic for sure and definitely bad, but his movie's pretty good. People are curious about this movie because of what might be called extra-textual reasons, because its director is an erratic and charismatic Hollywood figure who would have totally marginalized himself by now if he didn't possess a crude gift for crafting violent pop entertainment. I mean, I guess that's true, and I mean, you could even call this a violent pop entertainment, but it's not like it's completely shallow. Like, it is making an attempt to do a pretty historically accurate depiction of what the Mayan society was like at the time. Again, they're not showing us the whole thing. They're showing us a fraction of it. And they're telling us a fictionalized story within it. This isn't a documentary about the rise and fall of Maya. This is a snapshot of something at one time. So yeah, maybe you could call it violent pop entertainment, sure. But I don't know. It's not on the same levels like the Fast and the Furious movies, for God's sake.
No, not at all. It's, you know, not a history lesson. You know, it's meant to be entertaining as well. But I think you can learn a lot of what these people were like, you know, and their cultures and you know, the weapons they had and the things they did, you know.
And take this for what it's worth, but one of the main reasons the movie was so successful is that it did extremely well in Mexico.
Yeah.
So maybe you could just say, well, you know, a lot of Mexican people were just happy to finally see some piece of themselves represented. Yeah, sure. But you could also say, like, if the first crowd came out and said it's all shit, makes us look bad, you know, they wouldn't have kept going. So I think there were plenty of people that maybe in Mayan descent that were probably at least satisfied. As we said, it's a tricky thing when you're doing such a niche thing, such a specific small thing. People always take away from the movie that this has to be the be all and end all of it. Like, no, other people could make movies about it. They're just not doing it. And I'd like to see other movies about it. And I really want to see a movie, as I said, about the Spanish and Aztecs, their conflict. I'd love to see that. All I've seen is maybe a few scenes of a documentary touching on it, but everything else is just stuff I've read, not anything I've seen in like movie form.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's such an interesting concept. I think that's what really grips me. And I mean, I could watch this movie again right now. You know, it would be no problem at all to be, you know, captivated once again. Because it's so well done in every which direction. You know, I think the acting's really good, even considering I don't even know if that language is correct, you know, what they're saying. But cinematography's great. Their attention to detail is just amazing. Like with the, you know, the piercings and the tattoos and
yeah.
It's just
I would assume it's not just a bunch of made up bullshit because, you know, if you did that, you would be roundly criticized.
You know, I actually didn't know that the native or the Mesoamericans did a lot of the cartilage stretching. I thought that was mainly like African tribes.
Mm-hmm. Well, they do like a lot of the ear stuff. Maybe not so much lip.
I just wasn't aware of it. I didn't know. Yeah. But they all have got pretty big size, or not all, but most have big plugs in their ears. And
yeah, that's the kind of stuff that makes me feel culturally intolerant. Not really, but you know what I mean? It makes me wince because I'm one of those people that doesn't really particularly like piercings. And then when I think about the context, I'm thinking, oh man, you're in the fucking rainforest. All I can think is like you're in like this perfect environment for infection.
Yes.
Right?
Well,
so that's not me. You know, that's not me judging another society or anything. That's just me thinking, oh, I wouldn't want to do that. You know.
Well, I mean, assuming you
Oh,
use like a sterilized needle to do the piercing, you're still high potential for infection.
what amazes me about these peoples is how to this day there's like tribes living in South America that like run around the rainforest in bare feet. Like, man, the rainforest is just like a minefield of hazards for your feet. It's like, I mean, sure, you got mud and leaves, no big deal, but then you've got like sharp rocks, all kinds of animals and insects, like so many things, and yet it's a common thing even to this day that they just run around barefoot. I'm thinking, man, they must get tough feet. I mean, I get it. If you do it enough, your feet tough enough.
Right.
As people do, but it's the other thing I just can't imagine, because I don't know, I'd love to visit the rainforest someday and not just be some gawky tourist making an ass of himself. But I know clothing would be very important. I mean, make sure I'm well covered and wearing some good boots and stuff. I couldn't imagine just being barefoot in such a situation. I'm like, oh, I just stepped on a poisonous spider. Well, that's great.
And a thong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's well, they've got those. I don't know exactly what they are, but some sort of parasite that goes into your foot.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Maybe trichinosis. I don't know. It's one of those.
Yeah. So yeah, I always love the rainforest, but then when I think of it close up, such a breeding ground for parasites and things.
Yeah, I feel like those people probably developed immunities to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I assume if I was ever going to go, the place I always wanted to go was Costa Rica. And I figure if I ever go to Costa Rica someday, I'll probably have to get like 1 million shots.
Yeah.
I mean, to go to those parts, because I mean, if we're speaking about like various Central American countries, like a lot of the are not in great shape right now. They've got a lot of internal strife and problems going on. Costa Rica is one of the ones that's actually quite stable. Like Costa Rica doesn't have like militias running around and stuff, but it's still, I just mean the actual natural hazards of jungle. But yeah, Costa Rica's. I've had a fascination with that ever since probably I read Jurassic Park, because even though the island they made up is fictional, it's supposed to be part of Costa Rica, and some of it takes place in San Jose. I always thought I'd really like to go to Costa Rica. And plus, the other thing is the University for Peace is in Costa Rica, and I know I'm never going to be a student there, but it always sounded like such a cool idea.
What was the island called?
The fictional island in Jurassic Park, Isla Nublar.
That's right.
And in Site B in the Lost World is called Isla Sorna. I know Jurassic Park inside and out. All aspects.
Yeah,
but yeah, so this movie is in the Yucatan Peninsula, so Mexico, but still there's some Mexican rainforest, which looks very nice. Yeah, see anything here? The ending. So, and of course, yeah, so one thing, if anybody is familiar with either the book or any of the movie versions of Lord of the Flies, it has kind of a similar ending to that. Have you seen Lord of the Flies movie?
Probably when I was younger. I've read the book, but
yeah, there's two that I know of. One from 1990 and one from like 1962. It's black and white. I think 62. It's really good. The 62 one is really good because it like none of them are professional actors either. It's just basically kids they rounded up, and it's really good. But anyway, in all versions of the story, it ends the same way as like our main character, his name I can't remember, is being chased, and it's like he's done his best to get away, but now it's like he's definitely not going to be able to get away. And then he emerges out on the beach and just freezes, and then they catch up to him. It's like, oh, he's screwed. But then you pull back and you realize that there's actually a British ship and sailors have coming on board. And like, it's really great in the 1990 movie. I think it's like an American sailor or something. He just looks at the kids and they're all dressed up like, savages or whatever like that with spears. And he goes, what are you guys doing? And then our main kid drops to his knees. But anyway, it's sort of the same ending, right? Like, Jaguar Paw has taken out almost all of his pursuers. He's done such a great job, but now there's still two left, and he just doesn't have anything left. It's like they're definitely going to catch him, and he runs out into the beach, and he just collapses, and now they've got him for sure, but they all stop, and it's a great reveal. They pull back, and you see three big, huge Spanish ships off the shore there, and one of the longboats coming towards shore. It's a really great moment. It's really cool. And it's another thing that makes me wonder about the ending, though. So what happens then is he just decides, okay, I better take my opportunity here and leave. And they stick around to see the Spaniards. But then later, when he finally retrieves his wife and kids, because now he has a second kid because she gave birth down there. I'll also say, as somebody who hates birth scenes in movies, this is the one good birth scene I've ever seen in a movie. It's the only time I can ever think where they actually showed the birth and I thought it mattered and I thought it wasn't horrible. It was actually kind of cool because, she had to give birth underwater.
She invented the water birth. That's now popular for people.
Exactly. But anyway, is she there? So anyway, he's walking with them, and now they're a big distance away, but they're still looking out, and they see the ships. And she's like, "Should we go to them?" He goes, "No, we should go back to the forest." I'm thinking, well, of course, because you might want to remember that they didn't kill everybody in your village; they left all the kids. Shouldn't you go back to the kids? Because remember, they didn't kill the children. For as savage and evil as they were, I mean, it was still pretty bad, but they left the children. In fact, when they were leaving, one of the older girls came out and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of everyone. They're my kids now." And you're like, "Oh yeah, that'll be great." All I can think is, well, obviously you have to go find those kids, and now you have to look after all of them. Isn't that the right thing to do?
Maybe that's what he meant.
That's probably what he meant, but he doesn't actually say it. So it makes it seem like we're gonna go start a new life, and those kids, well, I'm sure they'll figure it out. Maybe they'll do a Lord of the Flies thing.
I actually thought she was gonna miscarry or something. The child was gonna die because, she was trying to escape or climb out of that thing at one point and fell down really hard, which is probably what sent her into labor to begin with. But
I have to say, at first, I was so stupid that I didn't even make the connection she's going to labor. I just thought she was, in a lot of pain or something. I was like, oh, yeah, duh, the baby's coming. So, yeah, people, a big part of the movie is, his wife and his very pregnant wife and young kid don't actually get taken away or hurt because he manages to hide them in a nearby sinkhole during the attack. And they're there the entire time. It's pretty funny because for all she knows, he's either dead or never ever coming back. And then a couple days later, he just goes flying past her. And she's just like, "Get down here." Because the thing's filling up with water and the rain and everything, right?
I thought it was really cool how she used the ants to seal up the boy's wound, like stitches almost.
Yeah.
And then she twisted the head off.
Yeah, she holds the ant bites him, and then she kills it. I think I read about that before, but yeah.
It's like a butterfly Band-Aid.
Yeah.
But, all natural.
I hate ants so much.
Those bastards, how bad they hurt, too.
Yeah. The ants we live with are nothing compared to down there. But ants are a thing I have a rule. I kill every ant I see almost.
Do you guys have fire ants yet?
I don't think so.
They're making their way up there.
It's hard for things to get to places like Nova Scotia. We're out in the water.
They just keep going further north, adapting to the colder climates.
I'm sure they will. I mean, we have plenty of other, run-of-the-mill ants. Yeah. I had ants attack. That was the last straw when I was in the basement apartment. Was when I got ants. I was like, I have to get out of here. I was losing my mind. Ants. I could see them all. They were all out in the hallway coming towards my door. The ants go marching one by one. But even before that, I've always killed ants just on principle because they outnumber everybody. Yeah. There's more ants in the world than every other species combined. So even if I dedicated my life to killing ants and spent every waking moment killing, it wouldn't make any difference at all. So I just kill them when I can.
I saw this thing the other day about termites, and now that they're tearing down the rainforest, they found this termite mound it's like the size of Texas. It's the largest thing anything's ever made before. It's
just a bunch of interconnected mounds and tunnels and crazy. Yeah, she's just napalm that. As much as I am for preserving nature, they're not helping, so get rid of it.
Yeah. Tearing up the...
Like I said, I'm a pretty nice person, and I don't kill spiders and stuff if I can avoid it, but I'll stomp on an ant just on the sidewalk out of general principle, because I'm like, you fuckers, there's too many of you. There's just too many ants, so I kill them when I see them. The only other thing I have an instant kill rule is the most loathsome thing on the planet from your earwigs.
I hate those. I
tell you, I had a very traumatic experience with them as a kid, too.
Really?
I probably told you this before. Okay, so growing up, one of the major places we played was on Ryan's family had a deck that was off his backyard. Pretty high deck raised off there. You could go under the deck, but you had to crouch down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we often played we had all these cool pieces of wood. They were about this big, a lot of them about this flat. I can't even remember the name of it. And we used them to play with our toys. We usually made bases for the toys out of them, right? We had a whole bunch of them. We'd always make really big, intricate ones. We say, this is the best one. Don't get rid of it. We'd always destroy it. Yeah. But anyway, so I think it was the beginning of one spring. And so a lot of the wood seemed to be missing. and we were trying to like get stuff ready again for the season type thing. And Ryan said that there was like a wooden box that was under the deck that might have had some of the wood in it. So we went under the deck and we couldn't really see because it was dark, and we hauled the box out. It's a box pretty long, longer than I can show, maybe about this deep.
Yeah.
And he and I together pulled it out. And once we hit the sunlight, we realized it was like crawling with earwigs. And I mean crawling, I mean it was like this much deep.
Wow.
They were just swimming in each other. And not only that, but some of them were like albinos, and they were like completely clear. And like we just dropped the box and ran. And it was the most
Do they
awful,
normally
wild
live
thing.
in numbers like that?
I'd never seen it, and I've never seen it since. I had no idea that they did anything like that. I mean, they must have pretty big numbers, because I mean I also remember a big part is like my front like portico or whatever, my parents' house. You know, I spent this summer too doing it, is getting like various potted plants ready and putting it out there. And I remember one summer that we had like it wasn't just like a pot, but you know, those more intricate things that have like, you know, an opening here, you know, you put flowers and all the different ones. Every time I kicked it, like earwigs would come out of it. And I like every day I would kick it and stomp on like 3 or 4 earwigs. And this was like day after day, and I would just kill them. I was killing dozens of them. So, I mean, a lot of them do add up, but yeah, I'd never seen anything like this, Ryan and I. We just pulled this box out. Like, we'd had our hands on the box, not knowing that they were, like, centimeters, inches away from earwigs. And, like, we pulled it out. Oh, I don't even remember what we did. We were blasting with the hose. I don't know what we did. Setting it on fire would have been great. But, yeah, and that's the only time I've ever seen albino ones, too. There were several ones that were completely clear. My God, they're vile, awful things. So, yeah. I usually don't see them living here, which is great. But if I see them, I kill them. I've seen the odd one inside the house at a time. What's funny is one of the worst things you can find. One of the worst situations I've had in a house, just like upsetting wise, like a big centipede, right? They're such awful, monstrous creatures, right? Centipedes, at least I hate them. But the fact is, it's actually kind of a good thing if you find a centipede like in your house or apartment, because they don't have any of the problems other insects have. One, if there's one centipede, that's it. They're territorial, and there's no others. 2, they don't build any kind of nest. And 3, they actively kill the other insects. That's what they do. Yeah. So in a way, they're kind of good to have, but I still hate them anyway, so I'll still kill them on site.
Yeah, I don't see centipedes very often, but I don't care for them either.
Well, I mean, they have so many legs, and they're one of those things, like if they were much bigger, they'd be like a nightmare, because they're killers too. Like that's what they do. They go around, that's what they do. They kill other insects.
Oh, yeah, those giant ones, they kill, like, rats and stuff.
Yeah, see? It's another reason why I'm glad not to live in the Southern Hemisphere, because you get down too far down south, the stuff gets too big.
I'm not even sure where those are, but yeah.
I mean, we got snakes up here, little garter snakes, but we don't have big snakes, and we don't have anything venomous, you know?
No venomous at all, really?
No venomous snakes.
Wow.
Like garter snakes, grass snakes, nothing with venom. Mm-hmm. What's funny is actually something that Manitoba is known for is there's this place in Manitoba where like thousands of garter snakes come each year to like mate, and they all get in this big twisted up snake orgy. You can find pictures of it in the internet. It's pretty cool. It's interesting because I don't think most people would associate a place with like Manitoba with snakes. And again, it's not like they're like pythons or boa constrictors or anything. But no, there's no venomous snakes. I don't know if there's any anywhere in Canada. Definitely not Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia doesn't have lizards at all, which is too bad because I like lizards. We do have the odd turtle. They're hard to find. I remember not too long ago, too, just stumbling upon one of those, outdoor discovery shows. And it was a guy, and he was in the woods somewhere in Ontario. And he was out, and there were like these little holes. And if he reached in with his glove, he was pulling out like big snapping turtles. I was like, holy shit, I didn't know they were in there. And they were... And, as long as you pick them up in the right place, they can't do anything, right? Because they can't turn their heads. But this thing's trying its hardest to, like, turn its head so it can, like, snap his fingers off. It's pretty fun. But, yeah. No, I mean, as much as I'm fascinated by wildlife in tropical places, I'm glad I don't have to actually deal with it. Because there's too many big insects and big reptiles and things like that I just don't deal with. Like, if you're in Australia at any point, like, you're never more than, like, 2 meters away from a snake or something.
Yeah. The northern Pacific rattlesnake. Northern Pacific rattlesnake, also known as the western rattlesnake in BC. Prairie rattlesnake in southern Saskatchewan and Alberta.
Oh, so they do have venom.
They're not very venomous, though.
No, well, still, it is a venomous
There
snake.
are a few, but it's only like potent to kill small prey. I think it's four total in the entire.
Because like there's rattlesnakes in the southwestern United States that a bite could actually kill a person.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're more than likely just going to like lose a limb or a toe or a hand or something, but as rattlesnake.
I mean, for stuff like that, like if you get to the hospital fast enough, they can neutralize it pretty quick. Yeah. The thing is, like, if you don't treat it, then it becomes a big problem.
I think copperheads are the really bad ones. We have, not because they're the most venomous, because they're the most prone to strike.
Most aggressive, yeah.
Yeah, like they don't warn you at all.
What's funny is the most venomous snakes in the world are some of the least aggressive. Then there's various sea snakes.
Mm-hmm.
There's like sea snakes living like in like the southern Pacific and stuff that like one bite would like kill you in like a minute, but they're actually super passive snakes that people can like handle. I still wouldn't, but they're also very hard to keep in captivity. They're almost impossible. They usually die.
Sea skates also, if they bite you, like you don't even have time to get back to shore before you're gonna die.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I don't even know if they have antivenom for those guys.
I don't think so.
I mean, why was serve no purpose if they're that poisonous?
Yeah.
But
even though the sea snakes are so venomous, they're actually it's very hard to get them to bite a person.
Yeah.
Plus, they're so deep down, it's not like a person would come in contact with them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like something necessarily to be afraid of. Yeah.
I was
no snakes in this movie though. At one point they'd use a snake.
Well, there were none, right?
I don't think so. I mean, at one point a guy gets killed by a jaguar. At one point he throws like a big nest of perhaps giant hornets or something at guys. He uses a poison dart frog's venom to shoot darts at a guy. But I don't think there's any snakes.
He shoots that guy in the side of the head with a blow dart.
Yeah, he gets like 3. He gets one in the neck and the side of the head, and he goes down.
And apparently that is the way jaguars, they rarely kill people, but that's how they do it. They crush the brain. They bite the brain. So they got that right as well.
Yeah. And also the fact that the Mayans revered the jaguar, as did most of the Mesoamerican peoples, because it was, the toughest predator out there. So the jaguar was a big deal. That's why they killed it, and then they actually asked the gods for forgiveness for killing it, because they try to avoid killing it whenever they can, because they respect it. They even had a black jaguar, which is more rare.
Mm-hmm. When I was in Guatemala, they called them Jaguar.
Yeah. So do British people, though, too. British people they say jaguar. I know because of watching Formula One, because that's Jaguar never does that well. You think they make high-end cars, but they never really do that well. But yeah, British people say jaguar.
Well, they pronounce it like the J, is J in Spanish.
Yeah, like jaguar.
With a Y. Y sound.
Mexico is Mexico. Well, yeah, I don't know. No snakes in this movie, which is, I don't know. You think at some point maybe a guy might get attacked by a snake or something, but whatever. They do a good job of showing off a lot of the wildlife. And they open with the cool hunting of the tapir, which I assume is, again, based on research. They're probably showing how these tribes actually would have hunted such a strong, powerful animal. And in the end, they couldn't even kill it with spears or anything. They had to rely on the lethal trap to get it.
Saw snake bite is in the keywords. Just trying to. No, I think somebody does get bitten by a snake.
Oh. I know there's a bunch of weird YouTube videos about snake bites that I don't want to watch.
Yeah, one of the guys gets bitten on the neck by some sort of a pit viper.
Huh. I don't remember.
It's
I was making a burger at the time. Maybe I got up and, although I did watch it twice. I watched it last week too, so it's weird that I was, because actually one thing I did miss last time that I only saw this time was just a brief bit where it goes back to his wife at the cave, where I don't even know what it is, but like two animals start fighting up above and then one of them falls down. I missed that the first time.
Yeah.
I don't even know what it was.
Another type of boar or something, I thought. Because she has to, like, beat it to death, basically.
Yeah, like it falls down. Like two of them are fighting up above, and it's like a wolverine or something. And then like she pokes it, and it seems like it's dead, but then it attacks her, and she has to smash it. I didn't see that the first time. I must have been out of the room when I watched it last week, so that was new to me. What's his son's name? Like running horse or something? Running something.
Turtles Run?
Oh yeah, Turtles Run. That's right. That's interesting because turtles don't run. So you wonder what that's based on. Because turtles definitely don't run. That's like saying jumping elephant. Elephants being the only mammals incapable of jumping. They physically can't do it. But yeah, turtles run. Jaguar paw. Yeah, his wife is just wife.
She doesn't get a name.
Yeah. Smoke Frog is one of the guys. Zero Wolf is like the main guy hunting him.
Oh, the big guy?
Yeah. Zero Wolf. And the other cruel guy who's not as high up is Middle Eye. Mm-hmm. Middle Eye's the guy that kills his father. Looking at some of the names here.
Yeah, I sent you a link to this guy breaks down the whole snake scene.
Yet I don't remember it. I'll have to watch it.
It looks like Middle Eye, but it's one of the other thugs that gets bitten around the same time the jaguar attacks.
I don't know why I somehow missed it twice.
So he just starts, taking them out one by one at that point.
Yeah. And while that's all cool, I'm actually less interested in that part of the movie when he's getting chased, even though that's the big dramatic climax. I mean, it's fine. I guess I just really enjoyed seeing stuff about their culture and civilization a bit more. And I guess it's believable because the idea is supposed to be like he's a more of a forest dweller and he's a hunter. But I mean, it's not like these guys should be completely out of their element. Because one, the city they're living in is a dead city, and two, even if they were living in the city at the height of its decadence or whatever, like I think they would all still be pretty well familiarized with the jungle. But I don't know. I guess they're just showing he's better adapted to it, whatever.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough. But yeah, it's cool when they're in the city. It's kind of too bad that it goes so quickly in the city because you get to see stuff like you actually see some of the upper class people and some of the stuff they wear and how they're painted up.
Lots of jade.
And jade, yeah.
All sorts of weird like nose pieces, and the one like witch doctor or whatever he was, he's got like jade glasses on.
Yeah. There's
no lenses in them. It's like circles around his eyes and his nose and nose, septum piercing, and I have this, whatever this is called, pierced. Which that seems very like a really painful place to pierce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, we get to see the king and queen there. They're kind of just watching the sacrifices, and we get to see their fat little son too.
Yeah, that's right.
Giggling the whole time as people are getting decapitated in front of him.
Yeah, which does seem more like an Aztec thing, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, again, I don't think that's too bad. But it would be good to see a movie about the Aztecs fighting the Spanish. I'd like to see that. Because then you'd have like the European perspective of like the first time they're exposed to this kind of stuff. I mean, no wonder they, think that they're all savages.
It's hard to believe they haven't made a movie out of that. I'm sure like John Wayne did one and called them all savages and like slit their necks and stuff.
Speaking of that, like one of his better movies is kind of like that, The Searchers. Like I'm not a big John Wayne fan, but The Searchers is a really good movie. And it's an interesting movie too, because John Wayne probably was pretty racist. But what's interesting is he's playing a character that's overtly racist. But the movie does show how like that's wrong. right? It's not like he's a hero, he's a great person, you know, killing all these. Like they show like the fact that he's racist is wrong in the movie. And I mean, this is a movie from the 50s. I could told you this before. Like my friend, I saw it because he saw it as part of the film class he was in at that time, and we'd rented it, and the thing had like an extra features on it, and the features were old. The features were like as old as the movie. It must have ran on like Family Channel or something, not Family Channel. They must have ran on TV at some point back in the day because they're talking about how they took this peaceful tribe of, I don't remember what the tribe they were using was, but they were supposed to be Comanches. Whenever the narrator referred to the Comanches, but like, we took this peaceful tribe and transformed them into bloodthirsty Comanches, and it was all about how like the Comanches like, yeah, wanted to like murder every white person they saw.
That's funny. John Wayne as himself.
Yeah, it's a good movie though, if a little long. There's also a really weird wedding scene too, where like after a wedding party, there's a guy who's using a fiddle and they're playing, but then a fight breaks out, and one of our heroes like takes the fiddle and like smashes it over some guy's head, and then like he just sort of like half-heartedly like hands the fiddle back to the fiddle player. It's I don't know if it's supposed to be funny, but it's so fun. But yeah, it's a pretty good movie. Because yeah, it's all about this woman who gets captured in a Comanche raid, and they like take her, and like John Wayne gets hired, and him and this other guy, they spend like 3 years trying to find her. It's a pretty good movie. It's probably one of the best John Wayne movies.
I'm just like not a Western fan at all, man. There's like 5 Westerns I like.
Yeah, as I said, I've tried to get more into them. I hope we can do 1 or 2 more on the show. We did our Australian Western a while back, The Proposition. I've
tried to get into spaghetti Westerns more, and it's hard. I can't. It's just something about it I don't care for.
I mean, it depends on where you start. Like, if you start with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, that movie is really slow.
Yeah.
Like, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is really long and really slow. I can appreciate it's a good movie, but it's just not something you can jump into.
Yeah.
But I mean, on that level, also long and kind of slow, but I would definitely, it's probably one of the ones of your 5 is Once Upon a Time in the West. Once Upon a Time in the West is so good. Like, not just as a Western, it's just a good movie. And it's like where Quentin Tarantino took like half his career from. Because like the whole thing of like having like long drawn out scenes full of tension where it might erupt in violence at any minute, like that is perfected in that movie. And that's basically what Tarantino took and ran with for his career.
Is that Sergio Leone as well?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, it is.
So, what was the first one you said?
Good, the Bad, and the Ugly?
That was the first one, right?
Well, no. I think the first one, I always get the other 2 mixed up because start over. Because The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly for a few dollars more.
Yeah.
And A Fistful of Dollars. That's the Dollars trilogy. And how it goes is I always forget which one is the first one, but the last one coming out in 66 or 67 is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Although chronologically, it's probably the first one because it's supposed to take place, I think, before the Civil War. But I can't remember if a few dollars more or a fistful of dollars. I can't remember which one is first. For a few dollars more is the one that's like basically a remake of Yojimbo.
Okay.
The idea of like the lone guy coming in and turning 2 opposing factions, like playing both sides off against each other and stuff. I've got Yojimbo taped. I'll have to watch that again soon.
Yeah, I love Yojimbo. I don't know that I know I haven't seen all 3 of those.
Well, I definitely like samurai more than I like cowboy stuff, but you know. It is interesting how the parallels line up, and that's why you could take something like Seven Samurai and make the Magnificent Seven out of it. You see how there's so many parallels there that work so well.
Mm-hmm.
Magnificent Seven, I think, is a little overrated, but it's good too. Don't watch the sequel, though. They made like 2 sequels to it, I think. It's like The Seven Ride Again. I don't know.
Oh, right. Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, not worth
Seven
it.
Samurai is way better.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Fistful of Dollars, 64. A few dollars more, 65. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 66.
Yeah.
And then...
and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is quite long. It's almost 3 hours. It's like 2:45, maybe. It's long.
So that pretty much made Clint Eastwood's career, right?
Yeah, because, I mean, he'd done, I think, a handful of American movies and not made any dent. And then he went over to Italy to do these, and those were just such sensations, that they were big in the States too. And yeah, that's really what did it. And he comes into the 70s as one of the biggest stars in the world. Did Dirty Harry in 71. Took from there. He did a couple more westerns in the 70s even though by the 70s westerns were dying out. He did The Outlaw Josie Wales.
Yeah.
Which I've seen pieces of on TV, but not the whole thing. And a couple others. I know we've talked about like just westerns in general before. The 80s was when it was almost completely dead.
Like Young Guns is probably like one of the only ones I can think of in the 80s.
There's like Silverado.
Yeah.
And another Australian one is the one with, who is it? Tom Selleck. Isn't that Quigley? Quigley goes down under or something like that. Yeah, Quigley Down Under. So
I'll tell you one I do like with Clint Eastwood is The Beguiled.
I've never seen it. When's that from?
I think that's the name of it. 60s, I think. 71.
71. Never seen it.
It's really good. He's he's in the South. It's during the Civil War, and he's a Union soldier.
Oh yeah.
And it's like a plantation, and it's all women because all the men are going to war, and they basically nurse him back to health. And
okay, I've heard of this. That sounds like something I've heard of. Yeah.
And they all want to bang him. Like they kind of remade this with Nicole Kidman and Colin Farrell a few years ago. That's really good. I think it's just called Beguiled, though. There's no the on the front of it.
Yeah. Oh no. When the right one comes around, we might do another Western on here. Just for the hell of it. Either one of the great classics or maybe something that's less known.
I'd be all for watching one. I'm just saying it's not my thing, but I'll definitely get some enjoyment out of it.
Not mine either. As I said, there's a handful that are like in it. I remember we talked about Soldier Blue, which I'd really like to find, which is not really a deep Western, but was sort of just known for being like an early exploitation film for being so violent. So I always thought it was interesting. Plus Candice Bergen's in it, and I always like her.
Soldier Blue?
Yeah, it was from the late 60s. Remember we talked about it. It was just basically about like some historical massacre that like some soldiers did, some Indians.
Oh, yeah. That sounds like a downer.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely a downer.
Donald Pleasance. Cool.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people forget that Jimmy Stewart did quite a few Westerns.
Really?
Yeah. He's in a good one that I saw called The Naked Spur, which reminds me a bit of The Searchers and a bit of True Grit, and that it's sort of like he's like a bounty hunter or something. And I think there's also a girl in that too, kind of like there's one in True Grit. I remember he's trying to rescue a girl from some guy. It's hard to remember, but it's a pretty good one. And it's weird because literally you have to buy Jimmy Stewart as kind of like a tough guy, which is, I don't know. Maybe it was easy back then. I don't think it's easy for today's generation to buy Jimmy Stewart as any sort of tough guy, but it's pretty good. It's like from 58 or something like that.
I can't think of Jimmy Stewart without thinking of Dana Carvey's impression.
Yeah. I remember we talked about this before. Come on over here to the window. Look at that mushroom cloud. Or he just puts a positive spin on everything. Looks like we're going to have ourselves a nuclear holocaust. I love Jimmy Stewart. He's one of my favorite actors who basically does the same thing over and over again. I mean, that's not entirely fair. He has played more complex characters, but he's so iconic, you can't get away from the fact that he's Jimmy Stewart. So. Definitely a really great actor.
Lived to 89.
Yeah. I think the last thing he ever did was like they did like a made-for-TV remake of Rear Window.
Did they really? Wow.
Yeah, like really shitty. And I think he's in it.
It was his last credit is Fievel Goes West.
Oh yeah, that's right. He's Wyatt Burke or whatever. Oh, yeah. You want to talk about terrible westerns? That's a terrible western. I mean, I know it's an animated one with mice and stuff, but it still counts as a western. It sucks. I like the first Fievel. The second one's garbage. But we talked about this too. Once you hit about like 1991, like Don Bluth's career goes in the toilet. Anyway, we can circle around and finish up on Apocalypto. As I said, like it for a lot of reasons. The main is just you're not really seeing this subject matter tackled in other movies, so it's nice from that perspective. But also, we do agree. I think it's well done. Like they go for the historical accuracy. The sets are good. The costumes are good. They try their best with doing like a sort of Mayan dialect to suck you into it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a movie about meeting the Europeans would be good too, but this isn't that, and that's fine. As I said, the movie I really would like to see is like Cortez versus the Aztecs. I think it's such an interesting story, and I realize condensing all that into one movie would be difficult, but that kind of thing happens all the time. There's all sorts of movies that like condense a whole bunch of historical stuff into like 1 2.5 hour movie or whatever, or even less. So it's not like they couldn't do it with that. I'm not saying it would be perfect, but it would be something. Because there's just not enough stuff left covering, that sort of history, really. Unless there may be movies from, like, maybe there's some South American or Mexican movies particularly, but there certainly aren't, like, mainstream Anglophile movies, English language movies. And again, I don't need English language. This movie's not English language. It's fine, but you know what I mean. This movie not being English language, it's still like a Hollywood movie with a big-time director, Mel Gibson, and other people.
I mean, it looks really good for only having a $40 million budget.
Yeah.
It's not a whole heck of a lot of money.
I guess not by today's standards.
Right.
2006 is still pretty good, but I mean, at least you see the quality on the screen.
Right.
They did a really good job of sort of building up that city, which was the main thing. The rest is in the forest, and some pretty good stunt work in the movie, of course. I don't want to go on to this because I've always talked about how I don't really agree with like stuff like the Oscars and stuff anyway. Like I don't really agree with really giving awards for these things because how are you supposed to judge them and how are you supposed to compare them? And as people have pointed out, like, does it even make sense to have Best Actor and Best Actress? Like, what the fuck is the difference? Like, is there any reason for doing that? There shouldn't really be, but it's just like, it's just, I guess, so women will get recognized. It's stupid, But anyway, I'm always thinking, they have all these categories, but they don't have categories for stunts or stunt workers, which I think is terrible. Because stunt workers, not only do they do good work, but they put their lives on the line to do it. I always have, just like you, big martial arts guy, and I really like seeing good stunt work, and not even just stuff like that, like fighting. Like I love seeing great stunt driving, movies that have like cool car stunts. Again, that takes a lot of skill and a lot of nerve, and it's too bad that doesn't really get recognized that much.
Yeah, those guys are really putting their life on the line, like you said. I think I was watching cursed films for. I watched The Crow and The Omen the other day, and there was a stunt guy that got killed in both of those films.
Right, and of course Brandon Lee himself got killed. Right. Doing not even really a stunt, even though he did do quite a few of his stunts himself in that movie. In fact, he was stunt coordinator on that movie, I think. He's been stunt coordinator a couple times in his career, obviously. Being Bruce Lee, she was pretty good insight into that kind of stuff.
I wouldn't want to be prop manager. I wouldn't want to be that's
just a horrible accident.
It is.
But here, I'll leave you with a really weird stunt story before we wrap up. Just the other day, I was reading about, so remember in Back to the Future Part 2, that's right, we're going there, in the future where he's getting chased by, like, Biff's, like, future gang. Remember they're chasing him on the hoverboards?
Uh-huh.
And they chase him, and he hoverboards his way, and then they're like, it doesn't work on water, and he's stuck on the water. But then he does something, and it makes them all go flying, and they all, like, smash into the building and fall down. The actual take for that you see in the movie shows one of the actresses in not the actress, one of the stunt women in that getting badly injured. Because you'll notice that they all hit the building. They're all supposed to hit, like, sort of like this clock face thing, and they do. But she hits a pillar first, and that's not supposed to happen. And the other thing is, they're all supposed to fall down on this same part that's the mat is, but I guess because her trajectory was off, maybe from the pillar, she misses the mat entirely and falls 20 feet onto concrete. She had like a broken arm and ribs and had like facial reconstructive surgery and stuff and everything, right? And she didn't even want to do the stunt in the first place. Like, she felt like bad about it or something. Anyway, it didn't end her career. She went on and did stunts throughout the 90s and 2000s, getting older. She's dead now. She was killed in a shootout with her ex-husband. But it's not even what it sounds like. She had remarried, and she and her husband ambushed, lay a trap for her ex, and ambushed him with their guns. I guess he was carrying a gun. He managed to kill them both.
What?
So he's not even in jail. Like, it was ruled self-defense. And yeah, and she's dead now. I can't remember her name.
Wow.
I read that the other day. It's so messed up.
That is bizarre. So it's that you actually see that's the final in the final cut.
Yeah, you'll see. Like, I saw a gif of it. Like, you'll see her you'll see how they hit the building smack on, but she hits the pillar first, which I guess throws it off. And then when it shows them all fall, I guess it cuts away pretty quick. But it does show them all like land, and she lands in front while they land in the right place. And she gets badly injured, but she actually continued and did stunts on quite a few movies after that. But what a bizarre way to die at the end. Like, she was trying to kill her ex-husband, and he killed her.
I guess it kind of serves her right.
I mean, you try to kill somebody, and they are forced to kill you in self-defense. Talk about bringing it on yourself. And not to mention, it was clearly an unfair advantage because she brought her husband into it, so it was 2-on-1. So, I mean, I guess, I don't know if the guy was lucky or skilled or both, but...
That is a fucking weird story, man.
You know me. Like, usually I'm not talking about, like, how I think it's kind of weird how people carry guns and stuff, but I guess it's good for that guy, or maybe he knew, maybe, I don't know enough about the story, right? Maybe he knew that there was a possibility that she would attack him. In any case, he was prepared, and he took them out. But it's not the way you expect the story to end.
No.
Not only that she died in a shootout, but, like, she was the perpetrator. Like, she was the one that instigated it.
And that's probably one of the more memorable scenes of that movie, at least for me.
I like that movie start to finish. I think this, I don't know, a lot of movies that like have trilogies, the middle one often either is like sort of seen as the weird one or whatever. I always think it's a good movie.
I think
speaking of Westerns, the third movie is like the weakest, and it's basically a Western.
It's the weakest by far, but it's still not a bad movie.
It's still enjoyable, and it still ties things up. And as we said, yeah, we're going to do the trilogy at some point just as a nod to the people that voted for it when it was a possibility for the 100th show. So we will cover that, but not for a while. Anyway, so that's Apocalypto, directed by the not-so-stable, but still pretty decent director, Mel Gibson. Yeah, it's pretty cool having a look into the Mayan civilization. And yeah, we wish there were more movies sort of covering stuff about the Mesoamericans, whether just about their own cultures or about when the Europeans came and what happened then. I think there's plenty of, room for some good movies in there. So I don't know, I'll look into it. But as far as like a big mainstream movies go, this is it. Apocalypto, that's it. But again, this would be a little later, and I guess more to do with the Europeans themselves. But I always was interested in that movie, The Mission, with De Niro. Of the Jesuit priest in Argentina or wherever it was. I can't even remember now. Just because that's in 1750.
Paraguay, maybe?
I think it's in both. I think it's like on the border or something. I think the movie takes place in both Argentina and Paraguay.
That's interesting.
I think I heard the other day, maybe I'm wrong, that Paraguay is the furthest south country to be completely landlocked. What's the largest landlocked country in the world? Touching no oceans.
I don't know.
You probably know the area, but it's hard to think of the country. It's Kazakhstan.
Oh, no. I wouldn't have got that.
Yeah.
Man.
Because a lot of people also don't know how large Kazakhstan is, right? Because there's as much as I know about countries, there's that whole area where you never even think about it, like especially the stands. It's like a lot of people have heard of like Pakistan, right? And yeah, maybe Kazakhstan, but then like there's Turkmenistan. There's of course now I can't think at all, but there's like 3 or 4 other stands. Afghanistan, yeah, people know that of course because of history.
That's a relatively small country, isn't it?
It's not small, but it's a lot smaller than something like Kazakhstan.
India is pretty big, and then Pakistan's below that, and it's small compared to India. I know that much.
Yeah, it is.
And then they've got a huge population there. Like that's like the third largest population.
India's going to overtake China in the next like 10 years. They're just completely
crazy,
full up. Yeah, I have to do a double check here because there's like 3 or 4 other stands that I can't even think of. I know I was pretty good for like, yeah, so like people know Pakistan, people know Afghanistan, people might know Kazakhstan, but then once you get into stuff like Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, like nobody thinks of Kyrgyzstan. Looking now, Uzbekistan,
yep,
and Tajikistan. Like I know nothing about those countries except that they're between like Kazakhstan's up here, Afghanistan's down here, and then you have those 3 in the middle of Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. And Turkmenistan's almost as big as Afghanistan, and it's on the Caspian Sea. So Kazakhstan, while it's completely landlocked as far as not touching oceans goes, it does touch the Caspian Sea.
Okay. So
Caspian Sea is not technically a sea. It's technically a lake. Anyway, now we're getting into Geography 101, which I'll save for another time. So anyway, thanks so much for being with us, and hopefully we can get an episode in next week and not miss anything. We'll get some productivity going here. We don't know what's going to be yet. We'll have some discussions. I've been watching some stuff lately. Some really good stuff's come on TCM lately. And I mean, I know we've already done a bunch of French movies, but I'm thinking more about some more French movies again, just because of some stuff I saw lately. So I don't know. That doesn't necessarily mean anything anytime soon. We even did a whole series on French movies because we did the new French Extremity movies. But I was thinking maybe some of the older movies, because actually, you know, we've talked about the French New Wave a few times. We haven't actually done any of those movies yet. We've talked about them, but we haven't actually done any yet. So that might be something coming in the future.
Sure. Sounds good to me.
Anyway, we'll have some conversations about that. And of course, we have our master list that we're always adding stuff to. So there's plenty out there. So anyway, thanks a lot for being with us, guys. Back. Good to be back.
Yeah.
Discussion Pocket Dimension, July 21st, 2020. All right, we'll hit you up soon. See you again next time. Bye. Peace.
Thanks.
That's empty.